Today, we put together a symposium which touched different things, and we're all professional here, so I assume you have a bit of a grasp what is digital art and what are advanced technologies applied to art, without necessarily being a techie yourself. So we have a brief, this is the brief introduction, but the keywords identified for today are culture, innovation, research, new creative entrepreneurship, and new artistic practices. So touching both on the artistic practice, on the curatorial practice, and education and institution approach as well. The keynote address, the first one, will be by Luba Elliott. Luba is a curator and honorary senior researcher fellow at UCL. Center for Artificial Intelligence in London, so she's touching precisely on that AI aspect, which again, it kind of came to prominence recently for good or bad reason. And, a lot of people are actually super enthusiastic about it. A lot of people are scared about it. A lot of copyright issues in terms of the AI application to art, for instance, came up. So I think I'm really interested to see what Luba has to say, and I really actually think Luba for making it actually today. It will be followed by a panel discussion about NFT and crypto art in practice. So there is, again, highs and lows and drawbacks and benefits and peaks and the themes for this functioning branch of contemporary art, let's say, which is actually the crypto art, crypto technology, let's say, applied to art. So the speakers are Ivona Tau, an artist, Alexandra Artomonovskaya, who's a curator and advisor, Valentino Catricalà, a curator of the Modal Gallery at Manchester Metropolitan University, not far from here. Well, 2.5 hours probably. Well, North Wales, yeah, it's Wales. You have 5 hours from one place to the other, so just... And then it will be moderated by myself. We were gonna have a lunch break at 1, just over there, basically. They will set up actually the facilities over there. And they will be followed by another panel discussion, this time on the business of art and technology. Because I do have a belief that as a curators, we do have, we live in this kind of institutional bubble sometimes, but at the end of the day, actually, artists also needs to make a living. And with the fee that institutions are kind of allowing themselves to provide to artists, it's very difficult to make a living. So artists do need to have platforms to show their work. The art market is an essential function, actually, of the art ecosystem, let's say. And I'm not as skeptical about the art market. I'm not against it. I'm not part of it, but at the same time, I recognize that it's extremely important for artists to have these opportunities. And with the digital art, it has been somehow actually put into discussion, the whole sort of a gatekeeping things about, the artist studio, the small gallery, the big galleries, the curators, the critics, and with the fact that a lot of digital artists, they're connecting to their peers, and the peers collect each other's works, and you have this kind of a circular economy almost, which allow them actually to make a living. So we will have actually speakers Mimi Nguyen, who's an assistant professor, University of the Arts London, and curator of Verse Gallery. We have Anka, owner and kind of a pioneer gallery owner in London on digital art. We have, so I lost my thought here, David Green, who is the founder and director of Data Art. Am I missing someone? I forgot. No, okay. And then also I moderate the discussion. The two panels are without visual presentation. I really want you to pay attention to what people say and what people have to say. So there will be actually a lot of talking, and at the end there will be some takeaway as well. At the end of the day, we have a keynote lecture performance by Operator, Operator are a duo of artists, Anya Catherine and Deja T. And I don't know what they will present, actually, but I'm really curious about it. And they're actually great in the work they do, and fantastic also as presenting their work. They had recently a solo show at the HEC, the House of Electronic Schools in Basel. And then there will be some sort of a closing remarks, reflection, takeaway points. And Elisa Ruska was meant to be here to do this sort of a session. Unfortunately, she got COVID, as you heard yesterday. So I invited actually Michaela Giovannotti and Elena Hill to do a joint takeaway. So each of them, they will kind of take some notes and reflect on certain points, and then they will have a conversation at the end as a sort of a wrap up, but also potential projection for future action, let's say. And that's it. At the end, that's the end of the symposium. After that, around 3:30. There will be a kind of a networking chit-chat. Hi, Anya, welcome, by the way. I was just mentioning, actually, half of operators there. And then we will have a guided tour by Manon Aus. Manon curated an exhibition called Hybrid Life in different spaces around the building. So you will have to move around, actually. And there are 5 artists: Gwemba, Mark Eaglen, Laura Cameron, Paul Jones, and a commission work by Datamosh. I think that's it. One thing, actually, Auronda Scalera, who's our curator in action, she will take some stories, and she will make some stories on Instagram, and so kind of she will be around filming you, basically, short filming you. And because we are kind of like this idea of live posting on Instagram quite a lot. And that's it. I would invite Luba. Thank you very much for the keynote speech, and thanks a lot for being here.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my slides. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here in Wales. And yeah, I'll give a talk about kind of my experience curating AI art, and yeah, hopefully that will sort of give you some ideas of how you can operate with artists and others who are kind of working with new technologies, as these technologies are more in their infancy and also as they mature. And yeah, so I guess I studied languages at university and spent a couple of years working in startups. Before around 2015 or 16, I became interested in in AI art. It was around the time of Deep Dream, which I actually don't have a picture of today. But there was this technology that was very kind of multicolored, and you had all these like crazy creatures coming out of normal images, and it attracted a number of people into the field. Let's say maybe the current wave of AI artists who are a bit more established, like Anna Ridler, Jake Elves, Mario Klingerman, like all those names, a lot of them came into the field between probably 2015, 2017. And yeah, I kind of started by doing what I kind of knew how to do well, maybe like organizing communities and running a meetup, where I invited artists and technology researchers to give presentations. And my aim with that was to have the technologists who were developing the latest tools. Maybe like today, I'd be inviting those who are developing the latest versions of like DALL-E or Midjourney or ChatGPT. So I was inviting kind of people like that to present their research so that artists and the general public could easily sort of hear their perspectives and then maybe find ways to incorporate it into their works. And in this image in the corner, you have Piotr Mirowski with a robot, and this is a project called Improbotics. So this guy actually has a day job at DeepMind, but in his spare time, he's built up an AI theater sort of project with various tools throughout the years. So beginning also with these robots that sometimes fell or caught fire during performances, to other, I guess, more contemporary tools as the technology kind of kept evolving. And this meetup really kind of led to a lot of other opportunities for me to present artists' works in a variety of settings. And yeah, I feel like I never really worked that much with the art world at the beginning of my career, but I spent a lot of time working more closely with technology conferences and business AI events too. So this is an exhibition I did at the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence in Cambridge at Jesus College, where you had this, I guess, digital art in, I think it was quite an old Cambridge College library. So, you know, it was a nice setting, and we were trying to figure out how to hang up Mario Klingemann's work in these kind of old books. And on the right-hand side, you have a work by Jake Elves called Closed Loop. And I think this work is particularly relevant now, even more so than when it was created, I think, back in 2017. So you have two neural networks. One generates text, and the other one generates images in response to this text. And then this text-based network looks at the image and then generates text kind of based on the image. So they're like in conversation, the one with each other. And I think it's a really kind of special project in many ways, because you have these two neural networks, each communicating based on how it can, so either with images or with words. And then also it's interesting to see kind of how good those systems were at the time in 2017 in both kind of capturing an image and generating an image from from a caption. Because, of course, nowadays with DALL-E, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion, if you kind of write your text prompt, you can get very beautiful images. And, of course, like a few years back, the technology wasn't as good. Yet, to me, this piece is kind of much more interesting than, you know, a lot of the other prompt-based work these days, because it has kind of a far more developed concept. Yeah, so I guess this is an example of digging out, I think, older art for more contemporary times. And yeah, so as I mentioned, I've worked a lot with business conferences. So AI has been a trend, I think, in the business world for even longer than the arts, right? So there were all these like big events, and I think in the beginning, AI art didn't really have much of a market, so it's not as if there were a lot of galleries they could invite there to kind of sell art. But because I had some visibility in the space, I was invited by various conferences. I think there was one I did in Dubai. There's this one I worked with in London called CogX that had a budget to kind of pay me and the artist to showcase the work. And I mean, in this case with CogX, I think it was quite a nice setting of Tobacco Dock, like in a dungeon place where you could project some artworks. But I remember the organizers still had kind of some vision of how they wanted the art to be displayed. So on the right-hand side, you have some works by Mike Tyker that they decided to print out and put on easels, which, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the kind of the ideal way of displaying AI art, but certainly, you know, some of my clients, that's how they prefer to do things. And yeah, this is Libby Heaney's work called BritBot, and it's an interactive bot. So there was like the projection and a computer, and I think it was like really good for a conference type of setting because you could have a chat with it, and it showed you kind of how biased maybe British culture was, or it provided you kind of answers based on, I think, this test that you have to complete for life in the UK. So it was quite a cool project. And yeah, this was my kind of first foray in dealing with the world of media art. And it was with Impact Festival, which I curated together with Alexa Nikina and Yasmin Keskintepe. And it was in the Netherlands. It's like a typical European media art festival with, I guess, various talks, an art exhibition, performances, and so on. And yeah, for that project, I commissioned Anna Riddler to do her tulips work, which was, yeah, which was really nice because Anna came to the Netherlands. She spent time buying lots of flowers, taking pictures, and kind of categorizing them to make a data set. And then, kind of based on this data set, she trained a GAN on the data set to kind of generate pretty images of the tulips. And I think this project was, was really successful for Anna, and she kind of later on continued working with tulips and other flowers and so on. And I think what is really special about her work is that she was one of the first artists who really thought about the presentation and the user experience of the work, right? So at that time, most artists chose to display their work like on a screen or as a projection. But Anna kind of insisted on including the data set. So if you've seen any of her exhibitions over the years, like frequently there'd be like a wall filled with hundreds or maybe thousands of these little photographs of the flowers, and next to that there would be the projection with the flowers, and kind of the two were presented maybe as equal in some way, because of course the data set is incredibly important in making the artwork and the final result. And at the time it was sort of felt that it was a bit underrated or unappreciated, the human labor that makes part of that compiles the data set. It felt that a lot of the credit was just given to the scientists who were developing all these models to generate the images. So yeah, that was that. And I think a personal highlight from that Impact Festival was working with Shimon, the marimba kind of jazz bopping robot from the US, who came to do a performance in Museum Spielklok, which is like a museum of musical instruments in Utrecht. So you can see it had, there's maybe like an orchestrion or some old musical instrument peeking out at the right-hand corner of the main image. And it was nice to have some very kind of contemporary objects, musical instruments to play a part of this in this museum. And then I kind of continued my work with technology conferences like NeurIPS, ICCV, ECCV, CVPR, so all these like acronyms that probably don't mean much to many of you, but if I do this presentation at a, let's say, more machine learning crowd, it's like legit conferences. So yeah, I did a workshop, which is like a mini part of a conference. And yeah, it was on machine learning for creativity and design. And there was a track where you would submit papers. And yeah, a lot of people turned up normally. And in the corner, you have the person who developed GANs, Ian Goodfellow, presenting. So I was, really happy that there was this opportunity to bring the presenters of the technology together with some practitioners, and so on. And as part of that, I started making these online galleries. So this is one of them, aiartonline.com, and there is also computervisionart.com, which is just for the computer vision-based pieces. And yeah, so this contains like a snapshot of AI art from 2017 to 2020. And then sort of, yeah, because COVID was coming along and, you know, there were other changes in the field, I sort of like stopped doing them. But if you want to see more historical art, it's there. And I'll just, I think, mention a couple of pieces from that. And yeah, so one of these is Evolutionary Faces by Matt Mariansky. And when I held my last workshop, this work kind of got the most attention in some ways, because instead of kind of, so in 2020, it was still kind of the time when everybody was using GANs. So, you know, they were training these kind of machine learning algorithms on some sort of data set to generate some sort of images. And this artist, he used a curve generator that he pitted against a facial recognition algorithm. So it was like a completely different tool to kind of to make the shape of a face. And that was kind of nice to to work with different tools. And also this work by Nouf Al-Javazia called Salaf, where the artist was looking at kind of her Saudi heritage and the fact that mainly the way people from that culture were represented was kind of deeply rooted in kind of colonial prejudice and imagery. And so she looked at the images she was able to assemble, and she removed the stereotypes, and this is kind of what you get. So there are a lot of kind of empty spaces because there isn't kind of enough data or images to kind of fill out what people from that culture wanted to represent themselves as. And again, I think this is a really powerful piece, both conceptually and also visually. It feels like quite different because there's all these kind of images of erasure in it. And then sort of moving on to the COVID years, I did an exhibition with Arbeit, which is a new media art gallery based in East London. And it was supposed to be an in-person exhibition, but of course with COVID, many things moved online, and that's what we did. And I remember kind of when we were figuring out how to do this exhibition, there was also this kind of concern of how do you translate this type of art online. I mean, of course, like with digital art, you could almost say that the online is the natural environment, but still, with many galleries, you'd have a page that would maybe have some sort of images on it, and it felt that it would be nice to come up with something slightly different. So I worked on this together with Rebecca Edwards, and she came up with the idea to have a plugin that would launch pop-ups at a specific time during the day. And so this is what happened. If you wanted to experience the exhibition, you had to download the plugin, you'd get the pop-ups, and in the corner on the right, you can see a work by Disnovation, which is, I think, called Predictive Art Bot, where they have these kind of, I think, concepts for artworks that are tweeted out, and then you get an image that corresponds to the concept. And since then, I've also been working with AI Artathon in Saudi Arabia. And this is, I think, quite an interesting organization for a number of reasons. So they approached me because they wanted to run this AI Artathon, or like a hackathon for art, which I suppose like wasn't really kind of a very popular way of making art at the time, even though, of course, coming from the startup world, like 10 years ago, you had a lot of hackathons or startup weekend events where people would like gather together in one room and try to build like a business in the space of 24 or 48 hours. It was really popular. And yeah, they decided to do something similar for art. So they invited various individuals to apply and then come to Riyadh to form a team of people and then try and make an artwork within the weekend. And then selected teams would be kind of given, I think, 2 months to iterate on that project. And the prizes for that, so I think this is first prize. It was for 300,000 Saudi riyal, which is about, I don't know if it was like $70,000 or $80,000. So it's like a lot of money for the art space. And yeah, this is kind of the people working on the project, and these are some of the artworks. So I was trying to compile these slides yesterday, and whenever I was like Googling for more information, it was like almost impossible to figure out where are the images of the winning project. So it's also quite interesting, like they invest like a lot of resources for this type of event, for training, but I think the work maybe is kept, and the work was presented at the Global AI Summit, which was held kind of later on, but it's difficult to find it in the public domain. But yeah, some images from kind of the project, and you can kind of also see that the images here are maybe slightly different to what is typically done in the West with AI art. Because I remember when I came over there to give talks, I had all my slides with artists like Mario Klingemann and Scott Eaton. And for those of you who don't know those artists, they look a lot at the human form, and sometimes like the images might not appear as fully clothed as at other times. So this is not the type of work you can really bring to Saudi Arabia to show, which was a bit of a, I mean, I should have known, but required a lot of slides that needed deleting. But anyway, yeah, in that culture, at least from my understanding of it, there's a lot more focus maybe on calligraphy or looking at the national treasures within the country and making more landscape-based work. So yeah, it was nice to have that kind of represented and funded. And yeah, then I've done a couple of online exhibitions with NFT platforms, one of them being Feral File. And yeah, so Feral File is a platform set up by Casey Reas, the founder of Processing, and yeah, and Bitmark. And yeah, so at the time when I was doing the exhibition, which was kind of this time 2 years ago, they wanted to have artists selling editions at an affordable price point. So I think a lot of these artworks that were sold maybe for $100 to $200. And yeah, it sold out very quickly because it was at the height of the, I think, NFT boom. And I included various artists who have been working in the AI art space for a number of years. And also a couple of artists doing different work, like Miles Som, who made this like procession of faces with boldly colored yeah, headgear and images. And yeah, there was also Helena Sarin, who is yeah, probably quite a famous artist in the generative art space. And I've mainly known her as one of the artists who really focuses on working with her own data sets of photographs, images, kind of engravings, and often combining mediums. But yeah, in this case, she kind of makes this procession of various AI-generated leaves, which is quite beautiful. And now I had a work called Trust the Bloom with, I had an exhibition called Trust the Bloom with Screens Guru, which was, I think, a platform that was going to be launched in Hong Kong. And yeah, as part of that, they did various exhibitions, like pop-up exhibitions, to kind of bring a more physical element, which I think is always a good idea if you're doing a purely kind of online event, is to have either pop-up exhibitions or talks. And we had some work by Ivona Tao there. So yeah, I know like Ivona will be part of the panel later on. So yeah, you can see a little bit of her work in advance. So I really liked this piece, which is called Mem Discontinued, I believe, because rather than kind of focusing on learning or improving, which a lot of these, I guess, researchers are trying to make happen because they want to make the best algorithm that kind of learns very quickly and delivers kind of the best looking results. This piece focused more on forgetting, so kind of like going backwards. And what else do I have here? Yeah, so Maneki Neko was an artist who, who's one of the DALL-E text-to-image generators to make this like really intricate image filled with kind of faces and flowers. And I really like this piece because I was trying to find kind of an artist who's working with these prompt generators, with these image generators, and this piece felt a little bit different to what others were doing at the time. And this is Devi Parikh, who is a researcher in the generative AI team at Meta, and she also has an art practice. And she's been kind of trying to make non-AI generative art by starting with a pattern of flowers and then transforming into the style of the artist's analog painting using a neural network. And apart from that, one of the projects I do is called Art and AI Festival in Leicester. And I run this together with De Montfort University and also some of the local partners, including the shopping center, High Cross, Phoenix, Art, Cinema and Gallery, and the library and a few others. So this was set up primarily by De Montfort to kind of bring some cutting edge art to Leicester, which unfortunately doesn't have much of an art presence, even though I think historically it did have more weight in the digital art scene with, Ernest Edmonds, who's one of the pioneers of computer art, exhibiting or kind of being affiliated with the university. And so beginning with a limited budget, we've been trying to bring some of my artist connections to Leicester to showcase their work in these public environments. And I think these are some works by Fabrizio Poltronieri, who is a Brazilian artist kind of based in Leicester and looking at the theme of cities in his work. And so we exhibited that in the shopping center and in the public university building. Then we had some prints by Sofia Crespo that, again, we put up in a closed shopping center kind of store. And we also commissioned Alex Mardvintsev, who is a researcher based at Google, to kind of make an interactive installation that you could log on to using your phone. And also it was projected in one of the public spaces in Leicester. And so you could interact with this installation kind of by going on the website, and then I think some of the different cells moved based on kind of what you did. And then finally, we also commissioned Tom White to make, I think, a cloud or some data visualization based on the words associated with the festival. So maybe I'll just skip to it. So this is exhibited at the Phoenix Art Center. And I think, this is probably the final project I'll talk about. And this is an exhibition I did with the Unit Gallery earlier this year. And it was called The Perfect Era. Again, looking at this kind of generation of AI artists who've been kind of practicing since 2015 or so. And a lot of them contributed new works to this exhibition, which was quite nice. And Mario Klingemann, so one of the, I guess, pioneers of this AI art field, he made 2 works. One is kind of one is a recreation from 2018 from a series of his experiments called Neural Glitch, where he manipulated the inner weights of some GANs and kind of so on to generate the image you see on the left. And then the image on the right is Mario kind of trying to recreate the same image from 2018 using a lot of the kind of contemporary techniques. And you can see that the images are quite different. So one is a lot more kind of realistic and detailed and intricate than the other. Which is probably good if that's what you're aiming for, but it's also interesting that the contemporary tools found it very difficult to recreate the older image because they weren't maybe trained on this early AI art as much. And we had some work by Scott Eaton, who generates a lot of kind of human bodies. And that's kind of the core of his practice, also being an anatomy specialist. And the GAN systems that have mainly been used by artists to kind of generate to generate images, initially they were making a lot of mistakes. So you'd have the facial features placed in the wrong place or the limbs at odd angles. And yeah, Scott Eaton sort of alluded to some of the earlier mistakes of those technologies to kind of make these series of works that are still high definition in places, but yeah, refer back to the technology. And I think, well, maybe I'll finish with this collaboration by Sophia Crespo and Anna Ridler. And yeah, so I remember they were trying to use tools that were kind of beyond the typical GAN-based models that they work with, and were kind of more related to the photography methods. And yeah, it was a really cool project. And I think at this point in time I will end because I'm also probably out of time. But thank you.
Curatorial point of view. Now we have an artist, great artist, and you show some of her work actually in Luba's presentation earlier, and 2 curators, and one independent, one institutional, and I would like actually to pick their brain really what it is. I will start with the artist, if you don't mind, Ivona.
Of course.
Did you press the, if it's blinking green, is
yes.
on. Fantastic. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey actually? So how do you ended up actually creating blockchain-based arts and this type of sort of expansion of the contemporary art world? And what are also the difficulties you stumble upon? That would be more interesting for me to know.
Yeah, of course. So I actually come from this weird intersection of technology and art. I've been doing a PhD in machine learning, but also been a photographer for a long time. And at some point, I just realized that there is a place for artists like that being artist does not really mean having to work only with traditional mediums, but you can combine all of those interests. So I started training first GANs. So GANs, the method that Lo was just mentioning, is essentially a way of taking AI and training that. I used to train that on my own photographs. So that was a way of expanding upon a traditional medium by having a new gaze.
Your photograph archive, let's say,
yes,
the archive of your previous artwork that you took on photographs and you trained the
yeah, so I was thinking about it as a way of expanding the gaze of my personal memories, of my personal experiences. And really even a term post-photography was something, or generative photography was something that really interested me, that you can include randomness, you can include some advanced technology into your practice by allowing it to make some sort of decisions that are not entirely yours. So by training a network on my images, what would happen is that I would see some shapes emerge, some places emerge that I recognize from the things that were in my data, but also a lot of the things would happen that were unexpected. And this is what was really interesting and what was the reason I was doing that, instead of just focusing on being a good photographer and not really being involved with advanced technologies and taking it a step further. And I would say that this is essentially the reason. Of course, it has a lot of challenges because when you work with a technology like AI, it's something you cannot fully control. I would say this is the reason I would do that, because if I could fully control, I would just,
Boring.
Yeah, exactly. like the new prompt-based method, sometimes I see those perfect images of Iceland generated, but I would say that's not the reason I want to use AI. If I want to have a perfect image from Iceland, I would just book a ticket and go there, buy a very nice camera. But what is interesting is really a way of looking differently at things. And for me, AI is a way of taking a lot of information. Let's say you have millions of images, and then extracting some patterns from that. And this is what's really interesting, because we humans are somewhat limited. So we would take this technology and see what it can do that we can't really do ourselves in a very limited time.
And the difficulties that you experienced were, I guess some of them were in the making of the artwork, but some of them were also in displaying the artwork.
Absolutely.
Which is, how did you stumble upon, what was your thinking process? How do I show this work to an audience that makes sense in a way?
Yes, that's definitely one of the challenges, because when you have a work, in my case, it's also a moving piece. So a lot of the curators often want to print the work, maybe display it in a still form, but when you're working with digital art and you want the audience to be immersed. For me, the most difficult part was really having this relationship with the viewer where I would know that they're focusing on the work. They are not just, when we see screens, we usually just, treat it as an ad for something. We don't really stop by and think about the work. So the screens is probably the biggest challenge for me.
Okay.
That's of course a problem because, apart from AR projection, we don't really have many solutions for that.
Many alternatives. They don't exist at the moment. Okay.
Exactly, but of course you can create a situation where there might be a darker room, there might be an emerging setting where the audience would really feel that they are part of the work. So that was the biggest challenge.
And Alex, I just wanted to, taking in consideration what Ivona said, actually, your work, for instance, as a curator and advisor from, the digital art to also to the world of NFT and blockchain, what would be your take in terms of the difficulties that you faced in your career to date, taking in consideration that, artists do generate work, and then it's kind of also the job of the curator to maximize the impact of the work, and sometimes we cannot really do it because maybe a limitation in the space or the setup or the equipment. And the NFT for me was actually interesting because it kind of opened up some sort of way of thinking in a different way. If you can just tell us your take on the NFT and blockchain world.
Thank you, Alfredo. I think it's there's sort of like some context to why I am where I am right now.
Yeah.
Especially because my journey also started with photography. Funny enough, I wrote my thesis on propaganda photography, like war zone photography, and how our perceptions are shifted based on different factors like captions, context, presentation. And so I was always thinking about the power of the image and its power to sort of like influence social change. So that was my focus, like how easily an image can spread and what an effect it can have. And you can easily connect this to art, because art is so much more powerful than words sometimes. You look at art, you connect with it, it has a power to transcend. And so I started with more sort of like on the traditional art world side, but I was quickly disillusioned because I felt like technology is not embraced at a speed fast enough to sort of cater for creatives that are not considered to be the in a traditional sense, artists. And so that's where I joined. I think my digital art journey really started in 2016 when I joined .art. It was essentially the same way as you have .com, .org. I joined the company that was releasing .art domains. And we were tasked to sort of like price the English language connected to art, but also we were supporting different initiatives around the world which were pioneering sort of the embrace of technology and art. For example, we worked with Ars Electronica in 2020 on their first online pavilion with 200 artists. And then we worked on supporting the first digital and contemporary art fair, CADAF, which was where sort of like early blockchain-based galleries were, like Kate's Vase sold, I think, the first CryptoPunks to the Winklevoss twins. So it was like all this sort of like early periods, parallel to what Luba was telling us earlier today, was developing with AI, similar was developing with blockchain. And sort of like from there, I saw that this is true. Our digital artists, not only the buyers don't have the same level of confidence because image is so easily replicable, but it's also about exhibiting the work. And the whole statement we were making is that, at least online, if your art is under the .art umbrella, it's like Duchamp. You put the urinal into a museum, but now it's in the context of art. And I was in Moscow actually interviewing the director of the Multimedia Museum, and this is exactly what she said. You know, you're now in the sort of like within the frame of art, so now it's considered art. And I think right now a lot of artists also might be struggling with the fact that the platforms for exhibiting art are focused only on the commercial elements, but not enough on the curatorial elements. So the job I do at my company right now, we are trying to sort of focus on how can we flip that into sort of like giving back to the curators and helping curators facilitate the relationship between the artists and the audience. And this was what motivated me in 2019 to launch my own online curatorial platform for art. We had artists including Jake Elves and Mario Klingman exhibiting with us. Also, we had artists, we partnered with Lumen Prize for Arts and Technology to curate a section of artists. And we created a platform where you experience art online, but you have things like audio tracks from artists talking about their work. You could scan a QR code and you had the artwork in AR appear in your room. So we tried to see what kind of ways we can introduce for people to truly experience art online. And in 2020, blockchain came about. And I think what it really changed is it provided an element of trust between the buyer, like between the collector and the artist, because it didn't require as many intermediaries. It didn't require a trusted brand to tell you that if you buy this, this is legitimate. You could now directly see that this is the artist that made the work, this is the edition, and collect. And I started collecting myself as well. You could collect artists like Lorna Mills, who was part of the permanent Whitney Museum exhibition for as little as $5 for an edition. And I was like, wow, me, a person who would never consider myself a collector, can now collect artists who are in museums just because we were sort of like so early in this space. And I think you mentioned this at the beginning, where the way things started, especially in crypto art, was literally like most of the collectors were other artists collecting artists. And that's how sort of it had a snowball effect when the wider communities started coming in. Okay, this is a long talk. Just on the final note, it's great that we have Ivona here because as we met in Bitforms in New York, I had a show I curated and Ivona's work was a part of it. And I think a very big challenge we had was exactly how do we display the works. And we had a projector for Ivona's work. We did have a little bit sort of like small tricks, like the wall was painted black, but the space where the projector was white, and that really makes the color pop. So I think like we also had an audio at the back that was sort of like the support audio for the image itself to make a more immersive experience. So I think for other artists in the show, they sent us really clear instructions. For example, Maya Mann wanted exactly like one screen above, one below, because one was the caption for the video on the top. So I think it's sort of, as a curator, you work together with the artists and you say, this is what we have, and then together you work towards.
So you kind of tweak the space and the technology to kind of a better suit that work of that nature, basically.
The best you can at the moment.
The best you can, actually. Okay.
Yeah, but that's really nice thing you said. It's like when you and Bitforms were talking about the exhibition, we had this projector, so many screens, like what do you want and how we should do that. And it's working together, figuring out what you can do with the resources.
Valentino, you're on?
Yes.
You are. So from an institutional point of view, let's say, it's, in my view at least, institutions are quite slow to sort of embrace advanced technology and digital art in general. Maybe not so slow in terms of showing them, but certainly slow in terms of the, let's say, the curatorial scholarship on them. And what kind of difficulties did you find in kind of embedding yourself as a curator in an institution? The School of Digital Arts in Manchester, just if you don't know, has a major campus of 36 million pound, whatever it is, with an embedded gallery model and a whole media facade and facilities inside. So it's a great place. And so what was your kind of a first, you know, problem solving, let's say?
Wow. In 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to, you know, put a little focus on, there is a little misunderstanding, in my opinion, when we talk about art and technology, you know, which has always been like that. So first of all, it's not something new, because we think that it's new. And it's not new at all. There is a story, an history behind. And secondly, we usually look at art and technology giving more importance to technology than arts, you know? So we think there is a new technology and then the artist works with that technology, and then a new technology is always following the technology innovation. And I think that it doesn't work like that, because we should, instead of thinking how much technology can help art, we should think how much art can help technology. You know, in that way, if you put the artist in the center again, you know, so you're not interested anymore in, okay, this is artificial intelligence, this is what, this is NFT, this is blah, blah, blah. It's art that use technologies as a way, of course, to reflect, to create, and blah, blah, blah. So this is why I'm not a great fan of terms like digital art, new media art, media, whatever. It's my problem, I know, but I know that it is very useful because it creates a circle, you know, like us, but sometimes it might be a little bit misunderstanding. So I think that before there must be a research approach. You know, I still think that curator must do some research. I mean, I know that it might sound a bit old-fashioned, and maybe I'm old-fashioned, but you know, research, it is an important thing behind. So the first thing I did when I joined SODA, that I joined SODA in middle of the pandemic, so I was working alone, meeting people virtually with a building that it wasn't ready yet, so it was a bit abstract in the beginning, you know? And when I joined SODA, so the first thing I did was, what's our vision? And in order to create our vision, you have to interpret it and understand the world you are living and the state of art as well. So I thought that, you know, I come from an era, you know, it sounds very old, you know, but I come from an era in which when I was doing my PhD, the new media art world was pretty defined, you know. There was the new media art world and the contemporary art world, and they don't tell much each other, you know, sometimes, but, you know, you had Ars Electronica, ZKM, and blah, blah, blah. But look at today, it's a totally different world now, you know. You have, I don't know, MoMA has made 2 exhibitions about art and technology in the recently, and Tate, Serpentine Gallery is an entire sector, you know. So where is the specialization of museum and context like ZKM or Ars Electronica, you know? They are losing this kind of, the power of being, have the knowledge around art and technology, you know? So they need to renew as well, and they're doing, in fact. So I think that if you look at the way in which younger generation work and use and engage technology, it's totally different from before. You know, there is not this big separation between an end, a beginning, and an end of a media. You know, it's more fluid. You know, there was before because the media context has changed as well. at the same time, so, and the approach of the artist as well. So there are painting using virtual reality, augmented reality. Where do you want to put it? In digital painting? I don't know. I have no idea, actually. And I don't care, most of all, But so when I started to create, to understand what's our vision, what's the vision we would like to express. So this is, we started to trying to, connect the old new media artwork made of, the context I quoted, I just mentioned, and also the new artwork that jumped into this work, I mean, curators that I've never wanted to deal with at all with art and technology, suddenly they started to make a big exhibition about art and technology, which is fine. But the important thing is that what we can give to this work is the research, is the vision. Because you need to know a little bit what happened before and what has broke, what broke to the point we are living today. So I know that I haven't responded to your question at all, but just to say that, and then that's the first thing that we can't. We have always to keep into consideration what's the vision, and in order to build the vision, you need a research, And then there are hundreds of problems, that I faced.
But do you think the institution there is a lack of vision in terms of digital and advanced technologies?
I think
from contemporary arts institution at large, let's say. We are generalizing here, okay? Because each of them, they have their own agenda, staff, and mission, and funding structure, et cetera, et cetera. But generally speaking, do you feel there is, kind of an integration, not much in the program, but in the vision and the mission of the institution themselves?
I think that, I think that some institutions that have been very important in the context of art and technology are trying to renew, and they are looking for a new vision, From our side, what we did, it was like creating this bridge. So we started to do 3 exhibitions a year, choosing the main topics of our era, speaking with researchers and scholars as well. And so opening a debate about it, So the first topics was game engine culture, not game engine culture, because it's not only a matter of technology, but it's a matter of what kind of culture that technology engaged, And in fact, we are living in a game engine culture. And then we made, a group show that connected, put together artists like Pierre Wig, Ito Steyer, or Trevor Paglen, along with, artists like Jacob Kupstenser or Cecil Bill Evans, and some NFT artists as well, in order to create, because they are working and they are reflecting on the same topics at the same time, And actually, the exhibition traveled to Fondazione Moderne Arti Visive. There were somewhere, some member of the Fondazione, yes. And then, very important was, this is not only new, and it's the time to start to learn the history, And we started to do project with pioneer in art and technology, and we made the exhibition. We did exhibition of Rebecca Allen. She was a pioneer in CGI. She made big project in the 80s with Kraftwerk and with, but the contemporary art has never been interested in Rebecca Allen. Now they start. And then, but at the same time, what are the most interesting contemporary young artists as well? And then on the younger artists. So we created a narrative, And also we're going to have the show now and the traveling project with this guy here, the Italian guy, Alfredo.
And some girl over there.
And Aurondo, of course, the Italian champ, It's a very old-fashioned word, I guess. But anyway, sorry, just last thing.
Okay.
And then, but the most interesting thing for me in Soda is not the fact that we have a gallery, the facade, and blah, 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 but it's the fact of having the whole school full of studio, very professional studio, and opening also a co-production project. So in this way, you can change the narrative of the building, which is not just a school and an art center, but is the whole building that is changing into creating, producing, and educating as well.
I was wanted to touch actually upon this one because I think, and I want to actually pick the brain of Alexandra as well. What do you think is the production side of, in practical terms, for the curator to investigate? Because I mean, usually we leave the production side to artists and we actually engage with the result of it. But I do feel that in terms of advanced technology and art, the production aspect, it almost come forward because sometimes the curator needs to bridge basically and to broker the relationship between artists and production companies or institution producing, having facilities for the production of art. What's your take on it? How important is the production side from the curatorial perspective?
Well,
in your experience, of
yeah,
course.
That's a wholesome question. I almost feel like whether it's better asked for the art business side of the panel, but I think
I will,
yeah, because I just want to take a step back. That we are discussing crypto arts, but I think we haven't touched upon this
no,
yet.
we haven't actually.
And it's important to make a distinction because digital arts existed, that's a very fair point, for like over 60 years, and it was a very small circle of people that actually cared about it and like talked about it. Like in the news, you wouldn't hear headlines about, oh, this digital artist is, you know. It was very, very small and selective. Artists like Rafika Nadal were already making big commissions, like for Rolls-Royce and other things, so there were standalone successful artists, but the real sort of like culture and people that started this massive sort of like embrace was not the artists that you would make a retrospective of in the traditional sense. There were CGI artists that, like people doing illustrations for commercials, or it was artists that have zero traditional art training and they would just experiment with the newest easy like photomosh.com tools that allow you in 5 minutes to remix something. And as funny as it is, these artists are now in the permanent collection of Pompidou. And I feel like it's important to talk about these people because they're the foundation of why sort of like so much attention is dedicated to digital arts. And maybe like the term NFT wasn't even used back then, it was crypto arts. And crypto art, it's not just arts that's sort of recorded on the blockchain, it's also arts that celebrates the crypto culture. And some of the art is physical, like artists like Trevor Jones, they do a lot of sort of like physical paintings, or a lot of Pepper-related artists. I just want to point this out because like the early marketplace platforms like Super Rare and Rarible, they were sort of like the ones that sort of supported ground up for these things to happen. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of very interesting history between sort of like the journey of an artist that was kicked off certain platforms, that it was embraced by a museum. If you Google trash art, I wrote an article about this as well, like what the hell is trash art, and like the interesting sort of like weird history behind that, which was another early movement in crypto art. So now I'm going to take a step forward to the production side of things. So let's be honest, most of the curation right now is happening online. So for most of the curation, especially when we talk about crypto art and digital art, it's happening on curated platforms. It's happening on platforms like Deca Art. It's happening on platforms like Verse, although you guys actually do a good job of having physical exhibitions. Then at Join, where I work, we've developed literally tools for curators to take NFTs they like, have a percentage commission from sale, and sort of like be more independent in terms of not having to rely on institutions paying you as a curator. So there's like that path towards self-sovereignty across curators too, not just artists. Then other platforms. So I feel like I've been trying to sort of like focus on the in-between. And when we're curating online, the biggest focus is how can you sort of like support the artist that he gets connected with a wider range of curators that are going to appreciate the work. And this is a completely different mechanism that we see when curating physically. I think it's also very much short-term focused as opposed to like long-term focused. So if we're producing an in-real-life exhibition, it took us, I don't know, 3-4 months to prepare. And then the artist had like literally a month to create the piece. Ivona said, and when I approached Ivona about the show, she's like, oh my God, thank you. Most people actually give me a 2-week notice. Like, so it's actually like, if I look right now, it's very speed run. And I work at where I work in my company, we work with a lot of conferences and they love doing exhibitions. And I think there is so much more room for improvements. And I think some of the biggest pain points right now is just sourcing decent screens, because these screens are expensive. And unless you have like a permanent space, there's no way to sort of like properly embrace it. But I think it's all like a mixture of so many different things. Like I can't just pinpoint one main pain that we're facing. I think it's a multitude of things. And let's be honest, it's always sort of like, I hate this word, but there's always a gatekeeper, and we just have to look at why are they choosing certain artists over the other. And I'm all for sort of like decentralized curation, where it's out in the open and it's very transparent and people see who the curators are, who are the applicants, and making that whole process more transparent. Because a lot of shows I see, and I've written an article about this, a museum, I think in Seattle, was doing a show, generative art, all male artists. I think it was 10 artists. And that was actually motivation for me to do the show in Bitforms, which was all female artists. But we never mentioned that in any of the press releases. It was just like a subtle statement about making that a bit more balanced.
Last question for Ivona. Your journey to, from photography to NFT, let's say, did you embrace the NFT and the blockchain-based art as a way to get around this gatekeeping that Alexandra was mentioning, or was it another motivation for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So essentially, as I was embracing technology by working with the newest methods in AI, at some point I started hearing more and more about crypto art from artists who were also doing AI art, for example, from Anna Riddler, who was also engaging with blockchain as a sort of a commentary on it. Mm-hmm. So I was interested and fascinated, and I always just love to try new things. So that was the initial motivation. In my experiments, it was usually just a medium to publish the works. I did not do a lot of work that were directly engaging in sort of ways. What I really loved is the direct relationship, of course, to the collectors. And for me, it was also sometimes even a bit maybe performative aspect of that, where you have a long form project, for example, and the collector who buys your work is the first person to see the work that gets created on spot. And this was a very new relationship with the collector in a way that they witnessed sort of birth metaphorically. Yeah. So a lot of those mechanisms, they influenced the practice as how I was publishing my projects, and also I started thinking about that. And in one of my projects that I did at Art Basel Miami last year with Tezos, I also was thinking about how people who experience the work, they can create the work. So this sort of relationship would not happen in photography.
Okay.
So as those NFTs meant that there is a single person that owns the work, but they can also engage with the model that is embedded in the piece and have an interaction on computer screen by following the instructions from AI model that was embedded in that. So it was a very different work from what I've done before, and it was directly triggered by NFTs and crypto art and blockchain. So those sort of experiments started happening afterwards, after I decided to put my first work.
So it was almost like a process of engaging an audience more than the gatekeeping aspect of it.
Yeah, I would say gatekeeping from the people who experience my work as well. It was something that I realized. And in terms of institutions, galleries, of course, when I was doing photography, I never focused on the commercial side of things, because it was in addition to my AI research, to my AI work, and I never thought about the commercial aspect. And suddenly it all happened that, well, you get those relationships suddenly with galleries and people who want to collect your works, and it was sort of a surprise that was not planned.
Okay, thank you. Fab, I would open up for questions from the floor now, because we have about 7 minutes. Well, let's try. Any questions, curiosity, doubts? You heard actually popping up names like, Art Basel, Pompidou, MoMA. So obviously, this kind of a milieu is kind of embedded in the contemporary art world. Even if we don't see it largely or ignore it, it is there. So I think it's an important... Please, hold on. Just wait for the mic.
Is that working?
Yep.
Is the motivation for development of AI arts because of expanding audiences? Because you're talking about tiny audiences, and you're talking about artists buying artists' own work because it's very cheap. So where does audience development come into this?
Audience development. Question
Who wants
for?
to start? Who wants to take you? Anyone can take it.
Anyone, really?
I can take it, yeah. I think the audience sort of grew incredibly over the last several years. At the beginning, that was the beautiful part where it's just you and the artist and you talk about their art and everyone has time for you. But it sort of things accelerated really fast because a lot of reporters only focused on the numbers. And they were really quickly to document for everyone how much that one NFT sold for, which was a lot of speculation. But behind the scenes, there was an incredible demand for generative art. So we have people that have collections of thousands of works, like Tyler Hobbs. And out of the 1,000, the cheapest one is $70,000 right now. Or like Rafik's Anadol collections being in MoMA, and I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people seeing it every day. I feel like we saw an embrace by both institutions, traditional institutions, but also online, where AI art was embraced, AI art was contextualized, and we're seeing more and more of that, especially with initiatives like Luba is doing, and she was talking today. And if before the meetups were, I don't know, 20 people, now there are 200 people, so you can just see like in the audience and in the people trying them out. And you know what else brought more audience is the fact that these tools became more accessible. So something like DALL-E, maybe the outputs are not as great, but you literally type something like, I don't know, a swan flying over a sea of bananas. And there you go, like you have that image generated. So it became easier for people to understand how this works and to experiment with it. And I think that brought a lot of new people.
Yeah, but also with regards to the growing audience, that absolutely changed the world because, as you say in the beginning, there was a lot of curiosity and a lot of interest. But with the growing audience, also what happened, of course, right now, there is so much stigma around AI art. There is so much, like, as soon as someone hears you're an AI artist, they're already, oh, so you type in those texts and you get works created. And the parts about curating data sets, about training for 2 weeks, about creating outputs, not even using somebody else's data, just your own data, those parts are very often overlooked because there is a lot of simplification with the mainstream understanding of what AI art is, and usually it's just understood as prompt-based art. And as it grew so popular, those kind of artists who were a very small group, they are just overshadowed by a huge mass of people who are just experimenting with the tools. And of course, a vast majority of that can be a lot differently made, but yeah, there's also some other challenges that go with the growing audience and also with the appearance in mainstream kind of understanding of the art.
Thank you. Yeah, Jordan?
So I wanted to have a discussion and push back a little bit on the notion of accessibility with crypto art and the blockchain in particular, because the platforms you're mentioning, Super Rare, Rareable, Foundation, are all pretty gatekeepy. I mean, you have to have invitations. The only sort of reasonable open access blockchain platform is Object, which is probably where you bought Lorna Mills's work, because it's the only platform that's truly open and has affordably priced artworks and gas fees that are low enough to encourage transactions of said artworks, because anything on Ethereum hits $50, $60 regularly, and if you're buying a $15 artwork and have a $50 fee, accessibility goes out the window. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, sort of coming from a history of making internet art starting in the early 2000s. I've personally found blockchain-based work and NFTs to be hyper-exclusive because it takes the sort of open access, free dialogues of internet art. And while it does allow artists like Lorna Mills to profit from their work, it's not really open and it's not really decentralized because each of these platforms take a commission apart from object. So you have to be invited and you have to take a commission. So it's fundamentally the gallery system, but just on the internet. And I'm wondering, I'm not trying to start a fight?
Is this sponsored by Object?
No, it's not. I mean, I don't have beef with Object necessarily because, I mean, what's the loss? Like 2 cents per transaction? That's not bad.
I think there's
I mean,
Tezos, but there's also other blockchains. So if you look at Avalanche and 01,
yeah.
it's for free. Like
Right.
you can just go and collect for free art from
But
artists.
the platforms that artists are making money on aren't really decentralized. They're just differently centralized. So I think, and this is where, and I'm guilty as charged, I run an NFT lab, so I'm complicit. But I do find the discussions to be really problematic and ignoring the fundamental exclusivity that also goes along with many of these platforms.
Well, this is music to my ears because the platform I work for is pay what you want to the platform, and you can import NFTs from other platforms. So that's when I say sort of like we focus on decentralized curation is more about having the artists choose the terms on which they sell their art. Whether it's Tezos, whether it's Avalanche, whether it's Ethereum, how much you want to pay the platform. And sort of like this is the direction we're experimenting with now. Because I completely agree, like gatekeeping platforms, I don't think it worked for them either. Maybe at the beginning it did, but I know a lot of them are struggling keeping the artists out. Foundation, I think, is now, so at the beginning there was this platform where artists could sort of like create an NFT, but you could only get on it through an invitation. And so artists were passing to each other an invitation, but what happened in the end is they made it open for everyone. So this is one example. And then there's another called Super Rare where you have to send a video interview as an artist to get on that platform. So this is like early on, but now there's so many platforms that are easily accessible. Everything on Tezos is super cheap because of the transactions fees compared to Ethereum. Although right now Ethereum is also relatively cheap considering the market is really down. But I don't want to go into the complexity why certain artists choose certain platforms. It's the same as you're represented by Gagosian, you give 50% away because it's Gagosian, or you go and get represented by a smaller gallery and maybe you only give away 20%, but then obviously there's a cost of not having access to the same collectors, not having access to the same PR.
Before you get to Gagosian, you have a long way. But I think Jordan's point is more about how tech you have to be as well.
It's less about tech and more about, I think, the perpetuated myth of accessibility, that there was no problem to solve because the internet is accessible. And sales of digital art. I think NFTs have a great, there's a place for them, absolutely. But I think part of the hype that created the bubble was less novel technology and more lockdown boredom with unfettered access to the internet and lots of time. And I think there was a lot of problematic art because of a lack of gatekeeping. I don't know if anybody else here spent any time looking at NFTs, but the amount of like misogynistic naked elves in the woods was astounding.
But even not on the blockchain, there are a lot of them on DeviantArt. I don't think it's NFTs. I think it's just arts in general. Like, if we think about 90% of the art market, we can include kids' pictures in kindergarten. But
right. But I think the problem that I was pushing back on is the claim that NFTs and crypto art is somehow more accessible than art was before, which I don't find the case.
But that's what a lot of those platforms also realize, I guess, because if you make an open platform, you end up with naked elves.
Yeah.
And if you have curators, you have gatekeepers. So, like, you cannot have everything.
I think that's where the discussion has to
But it's true that it opened up enormously the idea of what, if you have something to say, you can actually use digital tools to do it and to publish and to reach out to the network. If you do naked elves, that's fine. But if you have something more serious to do it, I think it's more accessible in the way that try to go to do the Randall Gallery and propose your portfolio work and see what comes back. You know, most of the time you waste your time because you need an introduction by another artist or a curator or another gallerist. And with the digital, I mean, that's my sense. With the digital work, I think you still have that one, obviously, because it's a peer-to-peer network, but you do have more opportunity to actually publish your work and get actually noticed by your peers, which then recommend your work or circulate your work or re-echo and do some sort of a Meganon effect. So this is, I think, is undeniable in terms of accessibility.
I guess my challenge is that the internet already provided that solution to
Well,
artists.
I don't think so, because everyone sort of like from the collectors, they wanted some form of stamp of approval that this is the original, and how would you prove that online? You couldn't. So this is, I think this is the main difference that, yeah, I see, that it gave that stamp of approval. So now an artist is an independent entity connecting with the collector, and the collector can prove that this is the artist's piece without having a piece of paper saying this is the right piece.
Two questions, last question, and otherwise they'll kind of they not give us lunch. So Elena, and then
Yeah, so just to go, yeah.
just go with the mic first.
But you guys go ahead. I'm
No,
not gonna
you
answer
said
it.
you touched upon the fact that the NFT market is super down, or some people could say like it's maybe crashing. So I just wanted to ask you why do you think it is like that? And I mean, what do you see is the future of NFT? That's to all of you.
Should I take that one as well? Or?
If you want to start, I'll follow
Okay,
up.
sure. I love these. No, I think it's absolutely true. Just like my coffee is 50% more expensive than it was a couple of weeks ago. Everything is crashing. But to be honest, it's a great thing. Because what was expensive wasn't art. It was collectibles. It was the monkey pictures, and it was...
Naked elves.
It was, our favorite topic. So what happened was there was a massive inflation caused by a group of people. And again, journalists love talking just about that. Like, why not talk about Ivana's work, you know? Why talk, because everyone just talks about price. So that was a very negative effect on generally embracing this whole market, because everyone just focused on, because NFT, it doesn't equal art. NFT is a subset of collectible, gaming items, fashion, clothing, and digital. So it's so many different things, and art is just like a one little element in which we're trying to exist without being disturbed. So I think what crashed is a lot of things that didn't have value to begin with, but it was just this mass excitement. But everything else sort of stayed the same. And I think the works of artists, actually AI and generative arts has been appreciating in value. So that's a very interesting observation as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
I just
Comment?
Yeah. I just want to add that the real matter around NFTs is that, I mean, the real thing is the quality of the artwork, you know, at the end of the day, because we are talking about art again, you know, it's not about NFT. So there has been a very big misunderstanding about NFTs. So it's I think that it's a very good time now for finally understand what NFTs is in reality.
In terms of art.
Yeah, in terms of the quality, you know, that's the time now finally to write, you know, something interesting and create something interesting about NFT.
Elena, last question?
Yeah, well, again, an observation going back to how we started about infancy. And I think if we look at the music industry, and we talked about that a little bit yesterday, that if we go back to Napster and we look at how everyone piled in and pirated music, and the artists, the creators, didn't get anything. And now with Spotify, which I do have to correct, there are distributors that work with Spotify, like gallerists, and they actually curate the work with their own labels, and they give a percentage in royalties to their artists. And I think that's where we have to unpick maybe in the next session, is that remembering where we are. And I think I think that you're doing an amazing job trying to figure it out, because we are in rough seas of unknown territory. And I think that it's all about maybe everyone in this...
That's what we are here for.
That's
it's
why
journey,
we're in
right?
this, is to just unpack it. And we look at the
Yeah.
music industry,
Yeah.
we can kind of look at that as an example.
Good for the next session. We stop for lunch. We come back at 2. Thank you very much. So second panel of the day, I wanted to focus on the business of art and technology in somehow, as I mentioned before, actually, I think it's an important part of the bigger picture in terms of contemporary art and digital art as well. And we have 3 representatives here, hybrid figures, I have to say, in between curating, production, dealing, art markets, sort of different platforms to support artists. Specifically, I think is one of their main job, really, each of them, and also to actually make art available for a public, for an audience, in order to provide a business for artists in order to make a living. So we have Mimi here ongoing, and she is assistant professor at UCL, a lot of other things, and curator of the Verse Gallery, verse.works. We have Anka Kultis, so the homonymous art gallery specialized in digital arts in London, coming from a background of math as well, I discover, and currently learning Korean, which is also an interesting aspect. And we have actually David Green, who is the founder many years ago of the art cinema, and then kind of moving into digital video, actually, edition, artist video edition, and then currently engaged with data.art in digital arts. Not good at math. That's a good point. So I will start from you, David. So it's can you tell us how do you see your job primarily in terms of your background, obviously, where you come from, but also what you're doing with data art, and how do you see the business going forward, and also the art scene going forward for this specific sector?
I think the first part is I see my role pretty clearly, and it's always been the same. It's about empowerment of artists, and that's never shifted. It's just how does one empower is often shiftable and changing, and I think I've tried to find solutions of empowerment for different things I've worked at in the arts since I started being involved from not being, I started life as an artist, and being empowered is not that easy as an artist. I kind of saw that as the flaw, and I kind of have worked tirelessly ever since in different modes. First, I actually started trying to work with the patrons and the collectors. It sort of came about that I started trying to find ways to get them to support artists and art venues first, and then sort of different things have shifted, and as we knew each other when I was doing things in cinema, that was trying to find a way to, suddenly I found myself doing that kind of work, and it's grown ever since. Won't go through all the details, but I've been working with artists, film and cinema, galleries, art fairs, artists at big level, at small level, at university, at artists from all backgrounds. And I've realized the thing that drives me is empowerment. How do you find the way to support artists? If you've got the funds, how do you pay them? How do you get them making a living? If you haven't got the funds, what else can you do to support them in terms of marketing, PR, support, networking for them and with them? So for me, it's pretty clear, and it's never changed. I don't think I've ever spoken about the art world in any other way. So I haven't got a kind of another mission. If I was to think of how I make money out of it, that's changed and that's fluctuated, and it's not that easy. But I've always tried to find solutions and sustainability. But I've been in it a long time, and that kind of support to artists, you give that experience. I haven't got the wisdom of some of my colleagues and people who are here. I mean, most of you have got enormous wisdom and experience, and I admire and venerate many of you here that I know. So it's that collaboration, find ways to make that collaboration work across the art world.
And what's the difficulties you can see now in the work you do at Data?
I think Difficulties. There's so many, but it's sort of, you're always trying to find how do you navigate through them. I guess it's still about how do you make sure that the artists get paid, and how do you, but then the shift in technologies and why we're here, that's been a big challenge, and it's not easy just because the genie is out of the bottle and it's exciting and everything's great, but how to navigate that excitement is a challenge for us all, again, why we're all here. And hopefully that's the thing we do together. We find ways through. I think we're just at a really gestational period still. I'd say we don't know where it's going to go in 10 years' time or more, but I've never seen such excitement with technologies, and I've been working with it for 25 years, and it's wonderful, but it's also scary, and I think the challenges are, you find ways to navigate challenges when you know why you're navigating them. I mean, often when it's to do with the value, museums, curators, entities find a way to navigate those challenges because there's money in them, our fields. And when there wasn't any, people didn't, I had for years museums just resisting working with digital media because it's too difficult, complex, costly. And now when there's a sort of a cost equation, people work out, I mean, how do you look after a work of art? Is going to be worked out because you know it's got value. If there's no value, you don't bother unless you really do intrinsically believe in it. But I've seen that as the big shift. There's a big value shift.
And you do produce arts, right? You actually commit some capital in order to work with the artists and produce whatever edition or one-of-one pieces, whatever you do, and try to, place those sort of artworks in either collection, public or private collection. And that's how you work at that.
Kind of.
Commission
artists, they get paid and they get a royalty on sale, and that's been happening for the last 10 years. Not really placing them so much. At the beginning, I thought it was all going to work like clockwork. Everyone's going to want to buy online, and it's going to be like a nirvana of buying easily online. I won't have to ever see another human in my life. I'll commission the artist.
Unfortunately, this one, it didn't turn out.
Didn't work out so well. People aren't like that. When it's buying art in the pretty much more old-fashioned terms, and there are great new initiatives, and Alex represents a lot of that world forward, where it's a very different mindset. I'm probably more of there's a sort of mixed group here, but I come from way back, but I've never been fearful of new things and challenges of technologies and beings, but it's the challenges, the people who want to buy it sometimes need to be nurtured, and you go to Freeze next week, everyone wants a champagne drink before they buy, and it's how do you empower the buyer. Isn't necessarily everyone's online wanting to buy this thing. There is this new world, which is not really new anymore, and that is a different headspace. But I think in terms of that model, I'm still sort of in a hybrid sense of world.
Okay, thank you. Anka, you founded the gallery in 2015, right? So kind of 8 years now. On the run, and what is your perception of your business actually specifically going forward? Click, and then it's green.
No. So what are the future perspectives? So let's start what we are doing right now, because the gallery was founded, as you said, in 2015, and we are specializing and showing mainly, but not exclusively, digital art, mixed media installations, always on the screens, on iPads and iPhones. And so we are navigated from the artists that I call today the Web2 artists working initially and presenting their work on social media that we invited to the gallery, and now more navigating through Web3, the artists who initially started presenting their works on various blockchains, platforms, where they could sell the works through NFTs. So my first ever exhibition with Modi Soda was a very special exhibition for a gallery at that time in 2015. Usually what was happening, that you all know, the gallery showed the artists' works, the works come from the studio, then they are presented at the gallery, documented, going to the internet. And like this is how people were discovering the works at the gallery and then online through the gallery. While what I did with Molly Soda was, what was very unusual is that Molly Soda entire of like signatures as well that I showed as well, have been showing for 8 years. The entire offer was already online on YouTube, on Vimeo, and more importantly, they had big crowds and followers that they developed on Instagram and Tumblr at that time as well. So everybody was questioning, like, so the difference was that I brought the artist whose entire work was visible online, brought to the gallery, documented the show, presented the works on iPad, iPhones, small TV screens and projectors, and then they went back again to the internet. So the path was slightly different. And people were asking me why, and like why I was showing the art, which was already everywhere, and more importantly, why I was selling this art, like everybody could see on the phone, on YouTube, for example. And so this was the one thing about the show which was very special. The other one, we followed for the pricing the secondary market path, which means we're looking, the price was based on the number of views of an artwork. So the popularity of the work was making the artwork more expensive. And this is what happens on the secondary market. Usually on the primary market, you look at the artwork, the size, and the size gives the price. Then on the secondary market, the more desirable work is the highest because people bid on it more. So we already follow this path of secondary market. So I was saying, like, of course, I'm selling and like showing this work. 2015, I was saying one day, like people will show their work and it's like, oh, this is a work, this is a work, but that, and this is mine. I was saying one day people will have their own collection on the iPhones. And this was, well, like before the NFT space. And just as the very nice anecdote, last year during Proof of People, which happened in London in July, organized by Vertical Crypto Art, I was with Annika Meyer, who is the curator in the digital space, and she was taking my place. And she came and she was, we were talking together and like sitting, and she told me, do you want to see my collection, my NFT collection? I was saying, Annika, thank you, that I'm so glad it happens with you. 7 years after, I was like saying one day people will have their collection on their phone, and like, I'm so glad it happened just right now. It was a very like memorable moment for me. So the gallery was evolving through time, so from this Web2 artist to Web3 artist, and the way we are presenting the works and curating the works. Also what I want to say, like very important thing, whatever the technology is, whatever the technology we use and embrace, I have always, as a gallerist, have the same mantra. What I'm doing as a gallerist is finding new talents, storytelling, selling, and writing. So we have to document everything. So in 2022, last year, the gallery became a hybrid gallery. We opened our second space, which is a virtual reality gallery developed by Galleries Now, a platform who develops like new technology for galleries to present the artworks. We spoke a lot about the curation and the problematic of the curation on screens, because this is what mainly happens on, for digital artworks. So the way we present the works in this phygital space, I call it phygital because you have to come at the gallery physically. We offer the headsets, the Oculus for visitors. Then you enter the space, and the space is like much larger than this space, like 10 times, with different rooms for different works, and they are presented in a very immersive way. The space looks like a museum almost. The problem with the TV screens is like fitting the works to the ratio of the TV. For example, in my space, we adapt the space to the works. So if the video is initially square, it stays square in the space. So we adapt the space, the number of rooms, and the whole curation, depending on the works we receive. So we don't like we just keep the nature of the work, like original nature as it was.
But do you represent the artists you're working with, or not at all? You go on secondary, so you bring in artists who are already out there
We do represent artists.
You do represent
So we do represent,
artists.
we show artists that we represent, some of them like for 7 years, like Signe Pierce, for example, and some of them, or we invite them, and sometimes we have more shows, even if we don't represent them. So yeah, we try to support the artists long term, yes.
And when do you, just
Yes.
out of curiosity, because that's also my word, when the artists you're working with are invited for, let's say, a museum show or a public art gallery show, do they go through you to bring the artists in? Do they ask for some support? How does it work for your gallery specifically that deal with digital art? Only?
Okay, it's usually a mix. Sometimes we have the works, so that we can consign the works to the museum, loan the works to the museum, and sometimes we even borrow the projectors or whatever was needed, because as you know, money is always missing when you do this kind of projects. So when you can help, we help. If you are, sometimes the artists go and work directly with the museums.
And how did you find the relation with the public institution working with digital art, for instance, in your case, in your experience? Are they relying on you in order to figure it out the best way to show the work? Are they having contact directly with the artists? What's your experience?
So there are two kinds of experience. One is presenting the works, one is selling the works to the museums. Like we sold some works to Whitney, and like it's so different than selling works to a collector, like private collector. So in terms of presentation, the museums usually really follow the advices of the artists. From my experience, they always ask the artists the way they want the show, they want the way they want the works to be presented, screens, projectors, or like all kind of setups. I think it's they listen a lot to the artists, and then there's also always the budget.
And did you find difficulties in selling the works to a museum, to a public institution?
No, it's not difficult, but what is different that the museums usually, and especially with the Whitney, for example, they ask so many questions. Like you just wonder where the questions coming from. So you spend hours replying to the questions, and these questions are very important because they are always about preservation, documentation, the way the work should be presented. If there is no one in between, in 20, 30, 50 years' time, so to make sure that the nature of the work is preserved and presented the way the artist originally wanted it. So these are great questions at the end of the day, but it takes time. And the other thing is usually the museums, they will ask, they will put on a work on hold, then they will need some time to approve the acquisition of the work. Once the acquisition is approved, it will take time for them to fund the work, to find the money to acquire it. So usually it will take like 6 months to 12 months to be paid for the work, and like to be paid also for the artist, of course, because if we sell, the artist needs the money. So it's usually a very long process. Of course, there's many levels of decisions.
Well, I think they're kind of right questions, because I mean, if it is a public institution, it works with taxpayer money, so they have to make sure they don't kind of put money into something which is in 15 years' time you cannot really access, because kind of the technology change and you can't really open that file or whatever. I mean, I think it's important questions that they ask.
Yes.
And you mean? There we go.
Yes.
So I'm intrigued about your double role here, actually, in terms of teaching and actually curating for a commercial platform, which is both an online platform and a physical space as well. Is there a tension between the two or not? No?
Absolutely not.
No?
I don't know. I think you guys know British universities are very neoliberal, so it's all about money. In a way, like Central St. Martin's, we have our core teaching, which is earning a lot of money. I mean, I don't know if this is recorded, maybe I shouldn't say this. But it's
okay, we can edit it out.
It's on the website. Everyone is aware of that. 1 year is £18,000.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of money going through, and that's the core teaching. But apart from that, and I think you guys also know, UAL, the University of Arts London, have foundation course, short courses. That's hundreds of pounds. And everyone can sign up to that. It's a bit like Sotheby's, I think they have extra courses as well. And that's targeted into an older audience that is not getting, degrees, but they want to train themselves. So They are offering blockchain courses, NFT, metaverse, and I don't think it's a bad thing, because if you observe the job market, for example, you could see companies like Burberry, Balenciaga, I'm speaking from the fashion side, they are opening departments of metaverse fashion. So there is a need of educating their own staff to kind of understand the technology and what can be done to adapt to, how they always say, Gen Z buyers. So I guess like the university are taking the opportunity to bring more new curriculum and more targeted into like new technologies to actually train existing employees of big corporations. And I don't think anything is wrong in that, because as I talk to my students sometimes, like, you are the guys who are going to end up in this department in Balenciaga. So without having universities up to speed, you won't be ready for the job market. Like, you're gonna graduate CSM and you're not gonna find a job, because this company's already moved on. They're already like having fashion shows in the metaverse. So I do think that it's important, you know, having the university also on the commercial side. And another example is, you know, if you look at other universities like business schools, Imperial Business School or any schools offering MBAs, the difference between these universities and Polish universities, who are like state funded, is that they can attract best educators because they're paying as much as Goldman Sachs. So because everything is like so driven in a commercial way, they can afford to have the best equipment, the best, you know, if you go to UAL, you have the best studios, you have the best machines, you have the best IMAX even to render all these 3D models. And I think like if someone is starting a career, it's quite important for them to learn how to use these technologies and learn to be prepared, you know, for the next step. Like, I went to an art school in Poland. We had nothing. So automatically there is a very, I mean, Iwona is one of the few artists working in AI in Poland, but there is no one from the art school that actually ever even experimented with this medium. So I think being in the middle of this both sides and at least having in an offering for students, it's quite important, because otherwise you'll have even bigger issues with, you know, countries like Poland that are not preparing students, and both from the art side and the markets and the job market side, and the Western universities who are like pushing out all this technology. And if you talk to like Sarah Mayohas, for example, is a great artist. There's experimenting with blockchain art since 2016. She was in Yale, and I think that by being there, she was exposed to blockchain quite early, and she's like one of the pioneers actually in crypto art. And for me, like for someone from Poland, it was kind of, I've never heard of blockchain in 2016. And that's interesting for me to just track different types of universities and how much money they have and how much actually the quality of students going out.
How does it work with Verse? Is it your work at the university feeding into Verse or vice versa, for instance?
So that's kind of how I started. I started more from the universities. That's how I got to know, I think a bit like Luba, like I got to know a lot of artists being from the academic side.
Yeah.
And then when I moved on into the commercial one at Verse, I already have existing relationships with artists, and then we could work on commercial projects. But sometimes I try to go back as well. So like whenever we do interesting shows, I try to bring the artists who are in London for our shows to the university.
To give a lecture,
yeah,
a
so
talk,
Anya,
or...
Anya and Deja were at CSM last year for a talk. And because, you know, on the other hand, the universities are quite bureaucratic in a way that, you know, to organize a symposium, it takes 6 months. So, and they're not really connected that much to the practice side. And they sometimes, they're like, can you get this artist? Can you get this artist? Like when you're on the other side, it's very easy to do that. But if you're a purely academic, it's quite difficult.
Struggling.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to bring that.
And how does it work Verse in terms of platform/gallery?
So Verse.
Do you work with representing artists? Do you commission artists? Do you bring artists already there in?
So I can say what's our vision. So Verse is quite a young company, and we're we're a digital platform that sells digital art with provenance on blockchain. And that's kind of how it looks like. But throughout the year, we've been organizing a lot of physical shows, and it started to look like a gallery. And it just because our team is quite from the old artistic side, and we just really enjoy to do that. But at one moment we had to slap ourselves in the face, like we're not a gallery, we're not representing artists. We sometimes we work on commissions, but we don't have a physical space. Like we work in Cromwell Place in South Kensington, but it's not a static, permanent space. Like it's on demand when we do shows. And the vision was always from the very beginning that we wanted to be an infrastructure, an invisible infrastructure for other galleries like Anka and David. Like we both speak to each other, that when you go to an art fair and you purchase digital art, you don't know that it's on blockchain. I think that was the vision, that you don't need crypto money to buy it, you don't need a crypto wallet to collect it. And you just go to a booth, you scan a QR code, and maybe there is like a digital poster edition. You just buy with fiat money or Apple Pay, and then you have it on your Verse account, just like eBay or Amazon, and that's it. And that was kind of always the vision of Verse, to be this invisible thing in the background.
And is it still the vision or did it change?
It's going to happen. So yeah, in November I'm going to Paris Photo, to the art fair, and then I'm going to have a booth there. But in the background it's Verse. And then we're doing another takeover of the Frieze Cork Street gallery building in London with 10 other galleries. And there is nowhere Verse written, but it's a kind of like the galleries presenting their artists, and some of the works will be NFTs, some possibly not even, but that's not the case. Like I don't think, like we don't really want to differentiate between NFT art or digital art or art. It doesn't really matter. I think if at least it counts as art.
Is it something that you all feel about it? Because I also perceive that out there, at least in the art market, gallery, they might deal with NFT and the blockchain, but they're not really kind of a push for that. I mean, they presented the artwork as a digital artwork. If they're on the blockchain, if they're not on the blockchain, it's a bit obscure, I think, on purpose. Is it true? Or is it just my perception?
I don't know if I can give an answer for every entity. I think my head is that I'm interested in the artwork that the artists make. We recalibrated to cope with the blockchain crypto explosion, and I'm probably re-entrenching in the older work because I've commissioned so many works and I want to do more with that, as opposed to sort of not sure where I'm going, because I have 100 artists that I've commissioned over the last 10 years, and I still feel there's a lot of life left in that work. I mean, I've never been that interested in technology by itself. I'm interested in how the artist works with technology, because the same way I'm interested in artists using oil paint or acrylic. So for me, there's not like a hierarchy, and I think that's possibly the same across most people who work intrinsically with it, because you're trying to find the solutions within limitations. I set up data that it would be really easy, like I said earlier, but you'd have its artwork, video or sound works on a website. That was its limitations. I couldn't show sculptures other than pictures of them, but I wasn't showing sculptures. I was showing video artworks, and it was finite. And I think that ability to be all things to all people is difficult for everyone. Yeah. And it's how you find those solutions. Museums struggle with it, and they've got that huge space. They struggle with it for all sorts of reasons.
And Anka, and you?
For me, I would say, like similarly to David, that art is at the center, art and the artist. And just for the definition of the NFT, I don't see like any NFT, like NFT as art. Like NFT is not a artwork, and for me, it never was. NFT is basically a receipt. Is a receipt of a transaction which happened between two people. It gives the provenance of the artwork, and it will follow the artwork. So in a way, it gives the provenance of the artwork, and this NFT points to the artwork, which is somewhere else, which is on the Web 2. It's not even on the blockchain or Web 3. There are few artists who work and like use the blockchain as a medium, but most of the digital art sold, what I call through NFTs. The NFT is a receipt, and the NFT and the blockchain is something that we will be all using. It's a natural evolution from Web 2, or like if I come back even earlier. So initially people were paying with cash. Then we had credit cards, and all your receipts, like what you paid, is you have the statement at the end of the month from the bank, and with the NFTs, the kind of statement which follows each individual item that you are acquiring or selling will be on the blockchain, but the item itself, the art, is not the NFT. NFT is a receipt.
So you don't really push as an NFT art, you just
Not
present digital artwork,
exactly.
whatever is the provenance. And
exactly. And,
okay.
and because we are bridging this traditional art world, we have many traditional art collectors with the new collectors. We still have collectors who, for example, in my last job, just to say, like Jonas Lund, a beautiful AI video that he made for the show. We sold it to a collector who has hundreds of video works. And he asked me to send him his work on a DVD, like engraved. And I asked Jonas, do you have any engraving machine for these DVDs? And he told me, I haven't done it for the last 15 years. So many of my collectors, what is important is that you provide the artwork to a collector, the highest version, the best resolution of the work, what we call the master file. It could be on a DVD. Most of the time, until last 3-4 years, we are selling and providing the works on a memory stick. You can transfer the work through any kind of platform like Dropbox or WeTransfer. And more recently, of course, they are sold as NFT, and they are somewhere that you don't usually know, but they'll be special places. But everything is possible. So the most important thing that the artwork is the artwork, and the NFT or the certificate of authenticity is something else. And all the insurances know that, and it exists in 60 years since conceptual art. If you lose the certificate of authenticity of a conceptual artwork, which is invisible, the work is lost. If your certificate disappears, the insurance will reimburse you because you don't have the work. And that's exactly what we do. If any collector loses his work, we can provide as many video works or video animations as they want. They need to have the certificate of authenticity. If they lose the certificate, the work is lost. So,
Mimi, to come back to you, in terms of this hybrid way you work as well with Verse, you have is an online platform, you have pop-up physical exhibition spaces. You have also other plans we talked about earlier, actually, about organizing a kind of an art fair as well, or some sort of a cluster of gallery dealing with digital art, actually. How do you see actually this? I found it interesting that you're just embracing this kind of a multiple way of being into the art market. How does it come? Where does it come from, this idea of retreating and expanding this constant sort of a dynamism of rather than being one thing for the market?
Oh, in terms of Verse, why
yeah.
are we?
But
no, I think
it's Verse, but it's also you personally, I think.
I think we went back to what we wanted to do. So at the beginning, when I joined Verse, also as a founding member, the aim was that we wanted to be the digital free space. We wanted to rethink whether people will go to art fairs anymore in the future and going to physically purchase these USB sticks, or are they going to do you need the champagne again, or how is this whole being consumed? And we kind of realized that especially me, we are buying stuff from Instagram. The stats are showing that the younger generation is weekly buying things from Instagram. You don't even go to shops anymore. So I think we're trying to think, is there a future of freeze being online? And throughout the year, we basically started without any collector base, for example, and that's why we started to do pop-ups exhibition, and that was the need from artists as well. Every artist we work with, they wanted to have the physical show, although the art is digital, and it was really kind of confusing for us because we had to be very creative in a way to showcase that. And then I think slowly after a year, when we establish our position in the market and establish our relationship and really understand our collectors, we went back to the first thesis that was we do want to be this digital fair or space for other galleries. So if you look at Verse, I think 70% is actually tech team. There are guys that are building the platform from a technical side, and we spoke with Anka about it. We want galleries to focus on the context, to frameworks, to do the whole curation rather than, it's not Verse. Verse is a platform that just gives you a tool. Let's say we're a Photoshop. And the role, and we believe, and we are against this whole, we had this conversation before, this whole accessible, open up to everything, Amazon type. We do believe in the role of gallerists. We do believe in the role of, in a way it's a gatekeeper, but we do believe in curation and people who been working 10 years in their fields and understand digital art, understand AI art like Lupa, understand, history of art, and I think they should be the ones who present art, not an artist on Twitter and then a random collector. I mean, if you look at collectors, there are uneducated collectors who buy from Twitter feed, but there are also very important collectors that hire teams of art advisors that are doing the stuff for them. And there's a reason why this team is there. And I always say that I don't want my accountant to do my plumbing. So I personally as a collector, maybe like in the future, I don't want to scroll Instagram and choose like a nice picture and say, I know best. I think I trust in people's expertise and professions. And maybe that's why I still want to keep my position in the university because, yeah, I mean, we're going to lose these professions more and more, and I think it's quite important to have the research part that is embedded in, you know, a full understanding. Like, I mean, every academic is paranoid to lose.
Yeah, it is.
A tenure.
Just last question, just a curiosity. Are you selling on Instagram as verse?
No.
No.
No, we have, but it's bad.
It happens.
It happens. David?
Promotion only.
Promotion only. Okay, super. Okay. Questions, please, from the floor. About 10 minutes, let's say, and then we go with Anya and Dijan. Come on, don't be shy. Elena. Sorry. Sorry. Microphone, please.
Oh, it was pretty clear.
So otherwise the people behind, I can't take.
David, you were talking about commissioning works and then selling them. So commissioning them for data art, your videos, because I work in producing these works and I know how expensive they are. So I get foundations and soft funding to help me with these crazy budgets. So how does that work for you in terms of the artists that you're commissioning, the video works, and the sale of that as a to make the two be sustainable, I guess is my question.
I mean, it's a tricky question. Got a budget to pay artists, but very limited amounts, so it's only a small budget. So the artwork or the artists we're commissioning, it's not like a sort of endless, a bit like what the platform is. It's finite, so that's what we can pay artists. But we've aimed to sell the work, I'd say at the beginning, and at certain points there's been better sales than other times. But I'd say my overall business plan has been, by commissioning artists, I've got things to do with them for the last 10 years. So I know it's not quite answering your question, but it's been the value put into that has meant we have the artworks. They're not like just we've commissioned it and it exists and it's gone. I'm doing projects now with works that I've commissioned over the last 10 years. And
You own the IP then, or you license it?
well, the artist does in the agreement we have with them, but it's, you know, we have the rights because we're distributing it and we're the sole platform distributing it, but we're open to working with the artist. I mean, the artist doesn't have to do we're servicing the artist and the process. So it's not sort of left to the artist to do things because it's artwork on a platform. But we try and represent the artist in the sense of the artwork we have to venerate and honor them and how they want the work to be living. So we won't just show it in any context. But we have tight agreements with every artist. And that was kind of quite novel at the time, which seems like an equation with the blockchain agreements. So in a way, we were having agreements to pay royalties to artists of what we're doing with the artist and the future of the work. And I think that's what I like about what's going on with new technologies, is that it's becoming more automated. It's something that often artists never had relationships where they had agreements with galleries or institution properly. It's all been a little bit of finger in the air. And that's changing. That's interesting. I don't think it's all good, because sometimes the idea of being an artist is that you're outside of, you know, all these sort of rules and regulations, but the other idea of how one serves them is at least written down. I always see an agreement anyway as a goodwill agreement, because our intention is to do the best thing we can do. We're not trying to rip off or fleece anybody. So, and that's the problem often with, you know, what is intention. And again, you know, we're all here probably trying to do best intentions, and that's trying to find our way and fudge our way through. And different models, they vary, but ultimately, if we are trying hard enough, we find solutions. If you're blocked by not earning money for it, or you can't raise enough, then you're probably in it for the wrong reasons. So when people want to raise I've had projects with artists who suddenly put a budget together for $1 million, but they also produced the work for nothing because they wanted to do the project so much, and it can vary. And I've got lots of examples of that. It's just if one has a budget of $1 million, one would want to commission the artist to make it. And that's, you know, I've never had those kind of budgets. So I've worked within very tight budgets, often with no money at all, and I try and find solutions to make it still happen, because it's possible. And most artists who have shows in galleries aren't usually paid to have those shows, and they usually give away 50% of their revenues to the gallery. But they make the work, and that's their livelihood, and that's a solution. It's not perfect, but it's historically, it's the way it works. I'm not really sure if I'm fully answering every element of what you're saying. There's too much in my head, probably too much in yours, but...
Thank you. Question? Yeah?
Thank you. Can I just ask a question? How many people in the audience have VR headsets? Own their own? Okay.
On headsets?
Headset, yeah.
VR headsets.
Yeah, VR. Okay, I'm just intrigued. Because I recently attended the South by Southwest online, and I was just surprised how there's very little, so little, in fact, very little VR stuff going on. Anyway, my question is actually, what does the next 5 or 10 years look like in this environment from you guys?
I have a reply to that. I think that in the very near future, and this is what we started to do at the gallery, instead of scrolling to see your show online, you will stroll in the VR to see your show. You will stroll instead of stroll. You will instead of stroll.
Scroll. Instead of scroll, you will
exactly. You will stroll in the space, but still digital. So you will have digital walls for digital walks.
Mimi, your take?
I'm already in this
Are we
future.
going to have this in metaverse in 5 years? No, I think that there will be we come back to physical stuff. I mean, I'm starting to enjoy that. But I do think that as long as the technology is ready, so there's a new test of Meta. They can scan in 3D, and there's a first podcast, I think, Mark Zuckerberg with Lex Friedman, and that shows that you basically can transform yourself, it's your human being there and moving. So I guess as long as the technology is cheap and ready, we will move to that, but right now it's just too expensive, and it's still very westernized. I don't feel like this will happen in Vietnam soon. So yeah, maybe Vietnam 15 years, and then in 5 years we'll see it in Silicon Valley, but people will start to have better. So my research, my PhD was about remote working and AI and emotional AI, and I do think that's why I bought a headset, was for research. And it's clunky and it's horrible and people hate it, but I think that once we have, it's exactly like iPhones. So Instagram wouldn't happen without a technology of a touch screen. So you had WhatsApp before, no one used that. You had, MySpace before, it wasn't. But the moment the technology and the nanotechnology was ready to compress everything in an iPhone, it just all went crazy. Tinder happened, right? So I think that if we can manage to have this Oculuses in a nicer tool, then we will all be in metaverse. But it just depends on whatever tech they build.
Thank you. Other question? Over there, up there.
Thanks. So physical space is obviously a premium. So some fancy galleries, there are a limited number of those in the world. So it's easy to know for the global population to know who are the great artists. They're the ones that get space in that. In the metaverse, there should be no limits. Not even now with generated AI, the models is not even a limit. So anyone can have this enormous, amazing gallery. How will we all coalesce on a single, this is the exciting thing to share, who that is or what that art phenomena is if it can be millions of them, we'd just be overwhelmed with unlimited numbers. How do you see that taking shape?
So is the question how you do identify the artist of the future?
Yeah, how will we all agree on the mimetic, who is the hot artist to talk about in the cafe when everyone saw a different one last night, nobody saw the same artist, and no one knows which ones were actually humans?
It might go down to curating, I think. I don't know. What's your take?
I mean, I hope we don't all agree. I mean, I'm kind of really a big fan of walking into a museum and no one else is in there. I'm not a big fan of the mass audience all thinking it's great, because mass audience also thought Donald Trump was great, and he won an election based on that mass audience. And I think the idea that we put that everyone's going to be doing something doesn't fill me with fear, it fills me with repulsion. But the human nature is wanting to be in a crowd, and that we can't fight. But I'm not sure the crowd is that interested in art. So whether we put it and call it art is one thing, but the human not all humans have the same taste, and we can, I don't know, there's going to be Gap or Prada in our art world. I'm not so sure it's all going to be digital and we're all going to be flocking there. We all are digitized now. We can't operate. I tried to take my mother to a bank the other day. She's 91 and she's very able on digital, but the bank wouldn't speak to her when she went into the bank. She said she can do it all online, and it's nuts, but she wanted the actual social nature of being in a bank with a human in front of her, and I think we're going to probably still be finding how we do that, because it's not working out right now. It's just not. I mean, and we have to find that solution, because we're all here together. This is a solution. We're not all online, and I think we want to be here together. So I think we're still, I said earlier, gestation, and I'm not sure. I definitely don't want to be, I'd rather this crowd, because we're probably all caring about each other, but different types of crowds.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think you've got to.
Yeah, I think in addition to curation, you said just to make your selection, will have more and more capable AI helping us in our decisions. So I think
I'm against that.
What?
You're against that.
AI curation. I think we are a product of algorithm curation already. Like, if I go on my Twitter, I literally thought that Jeremy Corbyn will win, because that's what my Twitter was showing me. I was in my bubble, curated by an algorithm, and then I wasn't aware that the whole country was thinking differently. And I think with us, we are still operating in digital media, and what we see on Twitter and what we see on Instagram is based on the algorithm. So you might skip some artists because Instagram didn't show it to us, and it's very, I'm very worried about that, every decision that we do, everything we buy right now is actually curated by an algorithm. I know it's obvious, but how are we going to escape it? Like, how the value of the artist will not be dependent on followers anymore, but do any institutional validation count? Because at the end of the day, you had this experiment, right? Like, number of views, number of followers, they correlate to the price. And that shouldn't be the case.
No, and I think as artists, but also as curators especially, we probably need to expose ourselves the most we can and go around and see things that we don't think we would like, because maybe we might be surprised. That I think is a duty, our duty in a way, to do that. Time for a last question. What is it?
I was going to ask the gallerist about, you were saying the size of the video screen and taking people interested in buying the videos into a smaller space where they could watch. I was wondering, the duration times has, like the 30-minute video, has the duration times changed in the selling of video, like attention span wise, or has any of that changed as well?
in the virtual reality gallery, you mean? In the digital space?
Yeah,
I think it's a really good question, because what I see at the gallery with the Oculus, first of all, mostly because you asked the question about how many people have a headset, I'm extremely surprised that 95% of our visitors, younger, older, all kind of visitors, this is the first time ever experiences a headset, which for me, it was absolutely like unexpected. Secondly, I agree that at the beginning, when you are in the space, even if our space, like when you are in the space, you feel, I call it my real digital virtual reality gallery. It's a real space with real works, even though everything is digital. So the quality of them at looking is extremely good. But as you said, the span, the time we can spend in there, it's limited because at a point or another, every proportion is slightly different. So at a point you will feel dizzy. So some people spend 5 minutes, some others spend half an hour. So for this kind of space today, the best videos would be the short videos. However, like shorter, I would say like less than, a couple of minutes would be the best if you want to see them like in the space as a whole, like entirely. For the current show that we are presenting a Lumen Prize, shortlisted nominees. We have around 30 artists, and most of the works, they were not meant for the space, and even like, to be watched online. They are sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes 1 hour. So what happens, like the visitors, they come, they start watching a video, and they go to another room, and you can finish to watch them as an entire piece on our website. But I agree, when you are in this space with this immersive installation, like these digital works on digital walls, it's really beautiful to watch them like actually through the virtual reality gallery, because the experience and the immersive experience and the sound, it's quite different. But I think we will learn and like spend more and more time with the improvement of the quality as well.
Okay, I think we stop here. Thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Yes, you've tasked us with figuring out the future of art and advanced technology. So Anya and I don't have a crystal ball, but I think we can go through a thought of experiment to go into the future, to reflect on the present, and see what values and see what direction we want to push towards to get to the future. And so we can imagine that together now. First, let's give you a bit of a background on Operator, in case you are not familiar. So it's a very modern romance. We first met on Instagram, and for any of you who know about our practice, there's a lot of theme of extractive technologies and surveillance capitalism, so people are often quite shocked about this, but it's true. We originally met to work together, and then we became wives. So we worked together, and we're married, and we're immersive artists, so it's a very immersive thing. So your background, though, is different than mine, so tell us.
Yes, there's a lot of togetherness in Operator, so we like to emphasize whenever we can that we are two individual human beings with different backgrounds and different lives before we met each other. So my background, I grew up dancing, training in contemporary dance, ballet, jazz, tap. Later that turned into choreographing, performance art, working with the body as a medium, directing film. So this is some of my past work, pre-Deja, pre-Operator.
And my background is as a human-computer interaction technologist, so in HCI, and immersive art and multimedia art. So generating large-scale, immersive, physical, digital, hybrid spaces that are interactive and developing works with many different technologies. So Anya and I's practice comes together as an immersive environment, bringing together performance and creative technology, resulting in something that I would say is medium agnostic. We're not allegiant to any one medium, so you'll see our work manifest in many different ways. An installation, something that can only be experienced on the internet. So we'll go through some of the variety of outputs, and hopefully you'll understand what we mean. But we like to say we're allegiant to the concept, so not a particular medium, but the concept and what the concept needs. We're also allegiant to our cat Claude, named after Claude Calhoun, the performance artist.
As the human body is really central to both of our practices, Deja from a human-computer interaction standpoint, and mine from the body as a medium and a tool and a canvas. standpoint, the body is really central in everything that we make, and we try as hard as we can to bring it into whatever output. So we have the human as the performer, human as the environment, human-computer interaction, where we think about how the audience's body or face, for example, there could become an interface to engage with the environment. And the audience also becomes the audience participant, and in some cases, which was born out of a practical need, the audience can also become the performer in the work. But as we're here today talking about art and advanced technologies, we want to kind of zoom out and look at digital art and look at what kind of comes out, what seeps out from our little digital art bubble that we all live in. What stories enter the mainstream? What kind of images are conjured up in the public psyche when they hear art and advanced technologies or when they hear digital art? So we want to do a little experiment. Close your eyes, please.
No peeking.
No peeking.
So imagine NFTs, imagine immersive art, imagine experiential art, imagine interactive art. What kind of images come up in your mind? Okay, open your eyes. This is just a Google search of this week. Okay, so I don't know what was in your mind, but in Google's mind, this is what it is, okay? But we think this is a very limited view of what immersive art, what art that uses technology can look like. And so we actually did the same experiment in 2019, and the Google search hasn't changed much. But I think the public psyche has changed, right? I think probably many people in this room might have a different idea of what interactive art or art that uses technology, what that can look like, different than the mainstream, but sometimes not. So let's talk more about the public psyche.
And Alex brought this up earlier in the panel. What people tend to talk about and what usually gets most of the attention are major sales, NFTs died again, this major sale, this monkey picture, this is really what gets discussed. Or immersive dead artist experiences also get a lot of press. So we find these really to be fascinating. Salvador Dali, next. Picasso. I included this because when I started looking up how many, I just looked up Picasso immersive experience and then it gave me the whole tour recap of like Picasso's on
busy.
tour. You know, he's super busy. With that and his mistresses, he's a very busy guy. Van Gogh. And so as we've seen, digital art as spectacle is favored by the mainstream. And this is understandable. We get it. But as Fran Lebowitz says, that's not art, that's a snack. And she was referring to a cupcake when she said this, but I feel like it also applies here. Yes, it's not art. These are not art experiences. They are art-themed entertainment.
And we just gave this talk a few days ago at Cambridge, and one of the students said, well, you know, isn't it kind of arrogant? What if people like this type of spectacle? What if people like that? Aren't you being a bit arrogant by saying this? And we had to ask the question, well, who is benefiting from spectacular digital art? Is it the artist? I mean, Picasso's on tour right now. I don't know who that's benefiting, but I don't think it's the public institutions or the artists themselves, right? But it's taking up a lot of space in the world of supposedly digital art. So we've looked at these three elements that, you know, what comes into the mind of mainstream digital art are driven by speculative markets, both NFT and traditional, both speculative, entertainment industries, and this one's very important. Big tech using art as ads, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about this a bit because we have a lot of tech companies commissioning works. And so then they have a lot of control over what is created and what is not.
So we strongly believe that the role of digital art is not to further enamor the public with innovation and big tech's new toys. This is not the role of art. But unfortunately, I think it has to do with funding. It's very expensive to make projects that are using advanced technologies. And so what you have and what this article in the New Yorker points out really well is that funding almost becomes a form of censorship. And so when you see museums or institutions that want to have this kind of work and Google shows up and says, we'll pay for it, what are the implications from a public institution perspective on what can be seen and what Google wants to show the world and what Google won't pay for? And so these are really important questions that we need to continuously ask ourselves. What kind of influence does the money that's paying for the art have on what's able to be said and not said, especially when we're talking about public institutions? We're very excited about this slide. It's a new addition. And I think in addition, the thought that needing to stay relevant or use the newest technologies being something that kind of shows that you're modern or with it. A lot of the stuff that we're seeing that people think is the future of art or is the most amazing thing ever is actually really old. This is from 2015. It's a literal tech brand activation for Intel at CES, which is a tech conference. So these are not the newest and coolest things you can do with technology. We don't need to be begging brands to pay for art to be made to appear modern, because actually most of the stuff that we're seeing is quite old and outdated anyways. So we're always asking the question, what are we innovating towards? What is all this innovation? Which direction is it pulling us? She says it all.
I love the whisper.
So dramatic.
Yeah. So sultry.
Yeah.
Yes, the underbelly of innovation is never going to be advertised, right? And so this, when we're looking at a lot of these immersive experiences or art and technology experiences, they're art themed, right? And often there's no artist. It's just, here's an immersive artwork with no artist, and it's art themed. But it's different than critical art. We can see if the audio will work. We have a lo-fi solution over here where we have a microphone on the laptop, but let's see if we can hear this. Otherwise, Ani could just tell us what's happening.
Why should you invest in us? We have no product whatsoever. There's no revenue either. And guess what? I have no startup experience apart from a failed NFT project from a co-founder.
We have a hard stop in 20.
AI.
Okay, can we clear up the whole day?
AI, generated, powered, sourced, and enabled. And I dropped out of Stanford to pursue this idea.
We are in. Are you pre-product right now?
We're pre-everything.
So good.
This, very important, serious content. Pro-innovation bias is the belief that innovation is good, it is always good, also appeal to novelty. Super interesting. So we see this in tech, which makes a lot of sense. Used to be it's an Uber for fill in the blank. Now it seems to be using generative AI to fill in the blank. But there's this feeling it's happening, everyone's talking about it, I need to get on board, and it is this bias and this feeling that whatever is new and modern is superior to how things were done before, and this really needs to be unpacked way more than we see it unpacked now.
Okay, so we are going to talk about dashboards. And lessons from dashboards. There's a book called A City is Not a Computer, and we recommend reading it. But in this book, the conversations of dashboards is used a lot as a metaphor and as a way to understand worldviews. So dashboards, this is coming from the book, are a way to display many sources of information at a glance, right? So this is very important if you're driving a car, for instance. You don't want a competing information hierarchy, right? You want to know the important information as it's happening, and this is important for your safety. And if we think about the dashboard for London, for instance, this is a very old dashboard. I took a screenshot of it the other day. It hasn't been updated in 12,341 hours, so this isn't accurate, but the way the information that is displayed is accurate. And so the indicators here are traffic, weather, stocks, tube line status, arrest, air pollution, and electricity, right? This is supposed to paint the worldview of what's most important to citizens at that moment. And the motives here are efficiency, profitability, disciplinary, enforced safety, which is also sometimes it has a lot of embedded racism in it as well. But the question is, it's a very socio-political act to curate indicators, to decide what is on the dashboard and what is not.
So we love this quote, along with many quotes in this book, that dashboard designers, it's not, simply just putting information on view, but as Dija said, curation of indicators is a very political act, and it's a doing. You're not just, grabbing information and putting it somewhere, but you're creating a sort of ontology. So we asked the question, what if we changed the indicators to understand how is London doing today? What if we asked different questions? What if we asked number of children who didn't eat dinner last night? What if we asked how many rapes were reported? How many people were unable to afford their prescriptions today? This would paint a very different picture of the city if we were looking at motives that were motivated by accountability, justice, or care.
Edward Tufte, who is an information scientist and designer, we quoted him here, if you're told what to see, or you're told what to look for, you can't see anything else, right? And again, that's helpful in certain contexts. But when the public is forced in a different direction, in a particular direction, then that's why we get and conjure up the same images, even if it's not necessarily the most healthy for our society. And we want to use the concept of dashboards and do a little experiment where we think of what is the current digital art dashboard, right? Let's look at that, and then perhaps we can look at some alternatives. So what are we attributing value to in digital art? So we are going to first illustrate where we see where we are on the spectrum from spectacle to art. And we think we're going to look at the dashboard that's more on the spectacle side of things. So a current digital art dashboard could look something like this. The indicators being spectacles, yes. Are you entertained? 100%. Chance of offense? Absolutely 0.
No one could possibly be offended by this work.
No.
Very important.
Screen size? Massive. Useless tech adopted, absolutely present. And how many people attended? Probably everyone. Timothy Chalamet and I guess his new girlfriend.
And now Kylie too, because they're together, so they both came, which is really good for the art.
And I like this one. Number of novel technologies used. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Okay. So these are just
and the paid for by.
Where? Do the honors.
So these predatory tech company logo, paid for by. So this is we're just trying to look at, based on the Google searches of earlier and the stories that are leaving our cute digital art bubble and entering into the mainstream, what information is coming out about what's happening in digital art? What are people making? What is important? What do we need to pay attention to? And in turn, what do we not need to pay attention to because all the most important information is presented to us that you just saw?
But we forgot the most valuable indicator of the current digital art dashboard, which is I just need the BSA, right? Okay, biggest screen available, so that we created that acronym so you can use it, BSA. I have a new show at MoMA, I just need the BSA. That's what Duchamp said. No, he didn't say that, we put those words in his mouth. Okay, so going back to what Anya said about pro-innovation bias, what we're finding is that the current digital art dashboard is very much in alignment, oddly, with pro-innovation bias. And we think, as artists, we could, I guess, speak on our artists' behalf, or at least our own.
And artists that we know.
And artists that we know. Any artists in this room that disagree with us, feel free to shout out. But artists have different indicators to look at. We have different priorities. We have different interests that are different than, say, Google or Facebook or Meta, whatever they're called now. And so what we want to do is think about a reimagined digital art dashboard. What could that look like, right? If we're thinking of the future of art and advanced technology, let's reflect on how we can change what's valued in the present and what indicators we're looking at as curators, as artists, as the public. So here's some other indicators that we could look at.
These are more indicators that we are interested in as artists who are working with technology. Considering health, considering whether the technology used is addictive, the working conditions of the people who made the technology are making the technology appear to work, what the motivations behind the creation of that technology were. The sale price, artists need to make money, so that's fine, but it's not the only point of the art. Empathy is present, there's consent, so people understand what technologies are being used, if anything is being used on them. It's actually art, and novel technologies are fine, but when they make sense, when they're serving a purpose, and when they do something or move the art forward.
So we're going to share a bit of our work, but first we want to share a framework that we use for ourselves. And you know, as Anya and I's work is large in scale and using a lot of technology, we wanted to make sure that we weren't falling into any tricks or gimmicks of art and technology. And it's very easy to do. So we wanted to create a rule set, because what we found is that the tech world is always eye-rolling the art world, right? Because they're like, okay, they're scientists and engineers. Come on, this is such a gimmicky use of technology. What do you mean you're going to wave your hand and then particle generation, all the video is going to follow on the BSA, on the biggest screen available? You know, that's an eye roll, right? And then you have the art world eye-rolling the tech world for, you know, the same gimmicky uses, where they're like, okay, but this is a tech demo. This isn't art, right? This doesn't belong in, you know, the public sphere of art, okay? And then you have both parties just kind of disappointed, asking,
all there is? Is that all there is? If that's all there is, my friends, then let's keep dancing.
Okay, so we created these rules, operator rules for art and technology that we use ourselves, and we created these in 2019. And we're still finding them to be quite useful in avoiding the tricks and the gimmicks for creating art that happens to use technology. So the first rule are no tech demos, very simple. We don't want to advertise the technology. We want to use that technology to serve the concept of the work. So it's kind of, we like to use this example where, let's say, Anya and I are on a phone call, okay?
Hey,
and,
Disha.
Hey, and Anya's in Madrid, where we live, and I'm here on stage. And we're on a call, and we're talking, and we're only talking about, like, hey, this is so cool that we're talking real time with you in Madrid and me here.
I can't believe you're on stage and I'm in Madrid with our cat. This is so amazing.
But it's almost like you're here because it's real time.
But I can hear
we're just
your
talking.
voice. So strange.
Okay, love you, bye. And then we're just having a conversation, but we forget to talk about anything because we're just talking about the technology that we're using and don't have any real conversation, right? And so we see this happening with art that uses technology sometimes, where there's no conceptual conversation happening. It's just a tech demo. And really, the audience participant, the person experiencing the work, doesn't need to know about the technology that's in the work. You know, it could be nice if it's related to the concept, but it's not something that they should have in the forefront of their mind. And we also like to say that anyway, you know, visible technology, like if you're trying to flex as an artist, visible technology isn't actually high tech. You know, the most sophisticated technologies are the ones that are invisible, that are, you know, falling to the background, right? Because if they're invisible, then there's power there. So I think also, even if you're trying to be high tech, still don't show the technology.
Also, we use scale, but it's very important not to rely on scale. And always asking the question, when the tech is no longer novel, will this work still hold up? So the power of this artwork is not, this is the newest TV that has this many billions of colors. It's a strong artwork, even though these TVs are very outdated. It's still just as powerful because it has a strong concept and presentation, and it's not relying on the novelty of the technology for the work to be interesting. And always have to shout out the choreographers. Yvonne Rayner, no to spectacle.
So this next video, another choreographer, Pina Bausch. This is a clip from a film called One Day Pina Asked, created by Chantal Ackerman, for any slow cinema fans here.
Watch it.
And it relates to spectacle, so let's watch the clip and then we'll talk about it.
J'arrive, voilà, ici. que vous voulez voir encore? Tout en l'air? J'arrive à faire ça. Je sais faire ici. Et ici. Tout en l'air. Là! Qu'est-ce que vous voulez voir d'autre? Les déboulés? Vous savez ce que c'est?
What do you want to see? I could do that too. I love that.
Yeah, so what this dancer is doing and what Pina is doing in this artwork is kind of mocking the audience's desire to see all the tricks. And you go to ballet to see the 32 fouettes and to see all of the big jumps. And so she's kind of mocking the audience's desire to come to the theater and then just be wowed with all the tricks and all the evidence of all of the training, which is completely the opposite of everything that her work is about. But what I find the most interesting about this is that the audience is really clapping. They're like, oh yeah, I do want to see more. Like, what else can you do, you know? And so it is tricky, and we make this parallel with digital art, especially with new technologies. This is yours.
Oh, well, like for example, like what's the equivalent, right? Like 6 million images in my data set, you know, is it using generative AI? Like, yes, and it's using every novel technology, and it's like, well, just because there's 6 million images in the data set still doesn't make it art. It might be an impressive technical feat, but that
or data visualization.
Yes. Yeah, but it could have 6 million images and still be art, but not necessarily. So it's important for us to use the technology that we're creating the work with conceptually and also critically as well. For instance, you know, I think of graphic designers and typographers who are, say, let's creating a poster for maybe this event. And they're choosing a typeface that they didn't create themselves. And as a typographer, you have to ask yourself, well, where did this type come from? How has it been used in the past? What, you know, was it used in the middle of a war? It probably has a particular context. Was it used for propaganda? How was it used? Because how it's been used and what it was created for and who created it brings a lot of weight into the work that you're creating. So as an artist using technology, it's very important for us to know where that technology came from, right? And lastly, we just feel that tech doesn't age well, but concepts do. So now, with this as our rule set, you'll see some of our rule set at play. We're going to go through 3 projects. On View, which was commissioned by the SCAD Museum of Art in 2019, Soft Evidence 2021, and Human Unreadable, one of our most recent works released earlier this year. So let's begin with On View.
We were living in LA at the time of making On View, and it was really strange because we were making performance installations and our inbox was getting flooded with experiential marketing firms that were like, can you make an art installation? We love your work. P.S. It has to be Instagrammable. So we started finding we were like, our medium is completely like the coolest thing ever for experiential marketing, and this is very interesting but also annoying. That.
I mean, I'll just add to this image, which is when we were living in LA, on Craigslist, people would post jobs like, anyone making infinity mirror rooms, please, you know, sign up for this job. And we're like, wait, this is someone's artwork. It's not like a job call, you know? And we saw that experiential marketing was co-opting the rich history of performance and installation art, as if, you know, it had never been seen before, but all of a sudden it's like Pepsi's like new thing at Coachella, you know? And we're like, hey, you know, that doesn't seem right. But it just happened to be this way because it was the most, you know, selfie-friendly type of art. And we feel, as experiential and immersive artists, that, you know, if you can take a photo of the experience and that captures everything, then it was likely not experiential. It was likely not immersive. You know, we think of in 2019, what was happening was like huge artists being commissioned by Amex to create actual selfie museums. Like, they weren't even hiding it anymore. They're like, just make a selfie museum, we're calling it that. And, you know, here it is. So this was very interesting to us because what we found is that there was this desire to be the subject of the art. And so we thought, okay, we're going to make a site-specific artwork, which we called On View, that will only work in a museum in the context where people are going to see art. But we're going to ask the question, are you going to see what's on view? Are you going to see yourself on view? Because even in the traditional gallery or traditional museum context, we're still seeing people experiencing their art with their back to the art itself. And often, the work is physically in the room with them, and they're not even looking at the artwork, they're looking at their screen.
And so, like, from a choreography perspective, it's really interesting. It's like, oh my God, I love this piece. You know? So that choreographically was interesting. And like I said, we were more fascinated by why is this happening and how is experiential marketing co-opting installation and performance art bleeding into how people experience art even in museums, because I think the behavior started to get mirrored and everything just became content. So we kind of started making a piece about this, and then we ended up here just looking into the why, like, you know, in the research of why is all this happening, why are brands working with artists, why the selfie, why the geotagging, and it led us to Shoshana Zuboff's Age of Surveillance Capitalism, which actually came out the same month as On View. So when it came out, we finally had a phrase to describe what our installation was about, which was convenient.
Yeah. But it could have came a little earlier, like
could have come a little earlier.
Like, yeah, because the curator's like, "What are you making the piece about?" And we're like, "Okay." All right. So we were given a room 20. Sorry, I'm going to use feet. 20 by 80 feet. So it was quite large. This space, 20-foot ceilings, and it was an empty container. And so everything you see here, we fabricated from the ground up. And there's 3 phases of On View. You can see even just in terms of construction, this took 3 weeks to build and, you know, on site, and about 5 months to build all of the technology and the scenic pieces off site. And there's 3 phases to the work. First, it's the terms and condition, which is an immersive TNC. Then second is the stages gallery, which is a theoretical parallel to the selfie stage. And the last part of the experience is the Golden Gallery. We called it Golden because the entire exhibition was built to the ratio, every single part.
The fabricators were like, kill them. Because the push plates were, you know, everything was, it was too much.
So here's kind of a sort of a view of the bones. That was weird. Okay, so let's talk about the TNCs.
So the first phase actually grew out of a need, because we were going to photograph the audience participant, and obviously we needed consent to do that, but we thought it kind of woke them up from the dream for them to walk in and be like, hi, we're going to take your photo in this installation, and it gives away the whole point of the artwork. So we decided to turn the accept and I agree to have my photo taken and put on view in the museum into an actual immersive contract, where we blew up that moment of clicking I agree checkbox into a room, which was an immersive contract that you signed by standing in a circle.
And then a week after On View went on view, what happened was there was this article in that we saw about the vessel in New York, where they got called out for basically in the action of taking a selfie, you've consented for your photo and your likeness to be used in any way that the vessel would like to use. So there wasn't even the moment of I agree, clicking that button, but it was instead in the moment of taking the photo. So this caused a lot of uproar, and this was also out the same week. So there was a lot of conversation about data privacy and extractive technologies around selfie culture. So the second part of the experience was the selfie, or it was the theoretical parallel to the selfie stage. So it was the stages gallery, where there was 2 stages that we built in this space. One was called Data Body, and one was called I Didn't Sign Up for This. So here you can see, this one's I Didn't Sign Up for This, where you are sitting in a choreographic position designed by us, and through facial recognition and facial sensors and custom environmental sensors that we built in the environment, you didn't see any tech in this installation, except for some of these light boxes. And what was happening here is that you were, it likes to jump forward twice. It's rushing me. So here you can see that there's just a physical organic space, but you don't really see any of the sensors. So this is really looking at IoT and ubiquitous computing, where the technology is falling into the background, which is nice, not to be nagged by your technology, but also there becomes a power issue here, right? So if all the technology is invisible, then we might not know it's there. And so we get a bit concerned about the extractive nature of this. So in the Stages gallery, what happened is you would have your photo taken if you were in a body position designed by us. And then in the Golden Gallery,
so in the Golden Gallery, similar thing to in the immersive T&C, you would stand again in the circle, and then suddenly the image that the installation took of you in the two stages comes up in front of you. And so at that moment, everyone's of course like, how did it know it was me? And then you realize that essentially the installation had been tracking you and all of your movements within the space, and the little thing that looked like a security camera was actually a facial recognition camera that saw your face and then pulled up your image to kind of let you know. And it's kind of a hyperbolic statement of how we are being traced and tracked, and then that image then belonged to us, but it was a closed system. But it's kind of similar to what's going on all the time, just navigating basic social platforms. And the only way that they were able to see themselves on view was like this, because of course we didn't give them the images. The whole point was you just gave this image to us and it's ours, and that's how people documented their moment of being on view in the museum.
It was hidden behind bulletproof glass. And actually the security guard that was standing next to the art case was actually a performer who Anya trained to be bored and yawn occasionally as well.
I studied the choreography of fine art security guards, and then I created a movement sequence because I find it really interesting as a performer to think about how the presence of a bored body in a suit next to an artwork makes it look more expensive. So again, integrating performance into, yeah.
And
those are fun rehearsals.
Just to give you a sense of the technology used, on the left you can see the virtual system, and on the right you can see some of the documentation of the space. And essentially what was happening here, and I'll restart it, you can see that you're navigating through a physical space, but there's no digital interfaces, right? So you're controlling a virtual world with only physical interfaces, physical input, and then you're also getting physical feedback as well. So if we're wondering how potentially we can create digital art without screens, this is one way. Okay, so let's move forward into our second work here, soft evidence. And this was commissioned by the EU Commission as part of Media Futures 2020 Horizon program, really looking at a call for projects to look at mis and disinformation and to teach about mis and disinformation through art and through art making.
So we decided to focus on the subject of synthetic media and deepfakes, and Soft Evidence is a slow synthetic cinema series that's depicting events that never happened. And I think at the time when we made it, it was important, but now I think it's even more urgent of a subject, just figuring out how to deal with the increasing indistinguishability between synthetic and real media. You.
So when we think of deepfakes, what usually is conjured up in our minds are politicians saying things they never said, or celebrities saying ridiculous things. But actually, the most popular use of this technology is, non-consensual pornography. 90% of deepfakes are circulated in closed media groups, like Telegram groups or WhatsApp channels, and it's really an attack on women. And so this is interesting because this isn't the thing that you hear about, and it's pretty dark stuff. So we wanted to create a project that is really looking at this, but at the same time, we wanted to have a conversation without dealing with the polarizing nature. So we wanted everything to be very much apolitical in content, to have a neutral ground for conversation. Here are some of the deepfakes. maybe you can talk about the last one that's about to come up.
And so, as Dija mentioned, 90% of deepfakes circulating are non-consensual pornography. So we wanted to take this medium that's usually basically has turned into a new form of violence against women to depict a moment of consensual queer intimacy, to almost conceptually offset how it's normally used.
That's not me.
So the idea is that the audience participant encounters all these scenes of seeing the protagonist doing activities and inhabiting certain environments while simultaneously looking at or hearing the video of her saying, "That's not me." And so you don't know whether you should believe what you see or you should believe this kind of testimony of her saying, because this kind of how dealing with media moving forward is going to be. How do you choose what to believe? Because there's going to be conflicting information.
And soft evidence is really looking at visual evidence. I mean, I think I'm losing battery, possibly. Check 1, 2. Okay. You know, when you would go into court, photography was always considered hard evidence, but this isn't necessarily the case anymore. And this is a tweet from the other day.
2 days ago.
A little concerning. Believe what you see, not what you're told.
He's not heard of synthetic media, obviously.
So there's two prongs that we're looking at, two prongs of the issue with synthetic media. And that is, hey, they're guilty, look what they did. And you're depicting someone doing something they've never done, being somewhere they've never been, or saying something they've never said, right? So it's completely fabricated media where someone is accused of doing something that they didn't do. So you can see here in the testimony, I've never read the newspaper, but then you clearly see here on the right here, and this is a deep fake. And she's doing the thing that she's saying she's not doing. Now, the second prong of the issue that we're looking at with synthetic media, which is possibly even more problematic, is this idea of plausible deniability and the liar's dividend, as Sam Gregory from witness.org calls it, where you're someone in power and you're saying, hey, that's a fake video, that's not me. Right? And usually the person in power in this kind of context, who's also controlling the channels of media, are often, you know, the ones winning in this context.
So as in that example Dija mentions, if it was a cop or a big politician that everyone loves and there was a video of them doing something inappropriate, it's getting really easy to see how existing social hierarchies and power systems would play out in deciding whether that video was actually fake or whether it was not, which is why synthetic media labeling is a really important subject that all of Hollywood and basically the internet and all media platforms are currently dealing with. Roadrunner, this Anthony Bourdain documentary, used an audio deepfake without disclosing it, which caused a lot of outrage. People were very upset. Whereas Andy Warhol, they actually disclosed at the beginning of every single episode they were using an audio deepfake to hear his voice reading his diaries. But there's all sorts of ways that people are exploring how we're going to label synthetic media and creating those kinds of new norms, which are even more important with the introduction of kind of fast synthetic media, which wasn't happening 2 years ago when we made this artwork. And Soft Evidence is currently an artwork in residence at the co-creation studio of MIT Open Documentary Lab, where we're exploring different forms of labeling which will be used in the installation version of the artwork, which we're currently working on.
So we're going to talk about the process of creating this work. There were a lot of questions earlier about ethics and AI and how that applies to artists and the work that they're creating. So in order to create a convincing deepfake, you need a lot of data. So we needed a lot of data, but we were concerned about problematic open data sets and data sets that we didn't create ourselves. After talking to Kate Crawford, who is the author of Atlas of AI, which I suggest, who's basically, you know, talking about the issues of data sets that are available. So she wrote about this in Excavating AI with Trevor Paglen. And here she talks about the issues of ImageNet. And you know, open data sets aren't inherently, you know, free of problematic issues. Just because they're open doesn't mean it's good, right? And so what we decided after speaking to Kate was that we were going to create our own data set. And here you can see us shooting for 5 days in Mexico City with our source subject and also Anya, who was part of the process and one of the subjects as well. And so in this, when we were speaking to the performer, we had to tell her, hey, we're going to be filming you, but we're going to be using an AI and an algorithm that's going to take your face and put it on Anya's body, and you're going to, all the scenes that we're filming with you, you won't be in the final, like your face will be there, but you're not in the environment where you're actually going to end up in the final artwork output.
Returning to like the indicators of what digital artists and a lot of artists are looking for, informed consent took on a whole other level, because we have appearance releases when we work with performers, but making sure the subject really knew what the implications were of being the subject of a synthetic media project required a pretty poetic and fun, and our lawyer was like, I don't know what they're up to, but and we kind of ended up creating like a poem with him. Where's the poem?
This one?
No, that one.
Here.
It turned out really beautiful, the way, yeah.
Yeah, well,
anyways.
Mark wrote this one. I specifically acknowledge and agree that such synthetic and manipulated media may appear to show or present my performing actions I've never performed, speaking words or phrases that I've never spoke, appearing in places or environments I've never visited, appearing in places where my surroundings have been altered, as used in this agreement, synthetic and manipulated media, and then we go on to say how all the tools that we will be using in order to manipulate this. Now, this isn't a solution, but it just, the fact that we have to go to this length shows, hey, this is a huge, huge concern, right? So that was before we could even start. We had to deal with that contract. So now, for the tech part of how we did this, so we had Anya as the body double and a data body, who's the subject. That's Karina on the bottom. And the second part was to capture the source footage. The source footage is the face of who you will finally see in the deepfake. And we captured her in many different lighting settings. And then we captured the destination footage. This is the final kind of art frame, art-directed frame, which is Anya. And then we face swap and put Karina's face on top of Anya's body here.
In this scene with the blue, we were going for like a Wong Kar-wai feeling. I hope you picked up on that.
We actually installed the lighting in this.
We lit the tintoreria.
Yeah.
We lit it.
Yes, it didn't come like that. And then the fourth part of the process is the deepfake algorithm, right? Where we use convolutional neural networks to take the input, X, and then the output is reconstructed as close as possible to the source subject's face. So here's some of the screen recordings of what it looks like. This was running, I think, for 3 weeks in order to fully finish the deepfakes. So it's pretty resource intensive as well. So here's one of the deepfakes. Now, moving on, just in interest of time, we decided to choose Telegram as the experiential vehicle in order to experience the deepfakes. Why is this?
Because as we mentioned, most deepfakes are non-consensual pornography that is circulating in closed messaging groups. So we thought that as a kind of decentralized and conceptual choice of a vehicle to disseminate soft evidence to a global audience, that we would have a Telegram group that's happening in live in conjunction with the physical exhibition. And then we're working currently on the experiential in-person version. In that version, I think it's important not to, show people this world and have this feeling of productive confusion of great, nothing's real, I don't know what to believe, bye, like enjoy your lunch. But trying to figure out how we can, of course, also this was an EU-funded project, and it's important that it's actually educational. People leave with some idea of, okay, what do I do now? How are they equipped to deal with a media landscape like that? So we have an advisory board, which we showed earlier, that are helping us with the kind of exit through the classroom, which replaces the exit through the gift shop version of this artwork, where people can also learn, how to have some sort of agency with all these changes.
So the final work that we want to present is Human Unreadable, which is part of our privacy collection. And the privacy collection, it jumped, there we go. The privacy collection really has roots in OnView. And then we created, after OnView, a signal blocking trench coat called I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Than. And so any device or RFID object that you put in this dark pocket can't be tracked, hacked, monitored, or traced. And so while we don't suggest that everyone gets these trench coats to protect yourself, that's not the solution, but the fact that we need this potentially is telling. And so when we had this coat OnView, I don't know why it likes to skip, it's rushing me, it's telling me my time's almost up.
It's up.
We put this trench coat OnView in a group show in Rome in 2020 at Renaissance 2.0, and Sofia Crespo was there, Ai Weiwei, many different artists that you see up here, Hakatao, and a lot of these are digital artists presenting works on screens. But then we had this trench coat hanging, and people thought, hey, is this just, a coat check? Someone left their coat behind. But no, but they were really confused how this related to digital art. And people are thinking, hey, what's with this trench coat? And so what we did was we got that coat back from Rome after the exhibition and brought it to Berlin. And we created an immersive experience and experiential artwork where you could experience the capabilities of the coat, the effects of the coat, and the problems of why that coat even needs to exist in the first place through AR filters, 360 projection mapping, audio, sound design, photography, and many different mediums coming together. And so this won the Lumen Prize in 2021, and this really became the baseline for the privacy collection, which is specifically looking at, I know what I'm going to say, I'm just waiting for there we go, is specifically looking at privacy, not in a Web 2 context like OnView and I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Than, but through a Web 3 lens, right? Looking at the tensions between privacy and transparency inherent in blockchain technology, right? Because in blockchain technology, everything's transparent. So how do you hide within a transparent system? We're not evangelists for Web 3, but there's some pros and there's some cons. And so the work really looks at both.
And the privacy collection is also site-specific to crypto culture. So each lot within the collection is looking at the same subject, tension between privacy and transparency, but through different mediums, and also kind of reflecting on what's influential or what's being talked about or what has momentum within crypto art in general. So we have lots that are related to PFPs that are kind of our answer to a PFP project. Then so it went Privacy Key 00, attempts, privacy portraits, where we live anonymized 67 collectors using analog algorithms last year in London, unknown sitter, and then lastly, human unreadable, which we're going to go into a bit more. And the kind of site for human unreadable and what we were answering to is on-chain long-form generative art.
So when we think of contemporary generative art, it is often found on platforms like Artblocks or FXHash. Those are the two most popular, and they're also very commercial. And they're fully on the screen. And there's also this kind of coded masculinity as well, pulling from modernism too, and the traditions of modernism. And Anya and I thought, well, the body is a main part of our practice. So how can we make embodied digital art? Because this is something that we've seen in the past, and there's many examples in the past. Jean Beeman and Olivia.
Also Rebecca Allen, who was mentioned earlier.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of early women in digital art were kind of exploring more embodied, sensual, physical approaches to digital art. But those haven't really become as famous or valuable on the market as some of the more modernist, cold, rational, symmetrical stuff.
Right, and so we wanted to move away from modernism and towards physicality. We wanted to move away from the Swiss grid because we believe there's only so much that you can express while adhering to the Swiss grid. We wanted to move towards physicality. We wanted to move towards sensuality and also chaos, right? These are elements that aren't, we don't see a lot in on-chain generative art, specifically Artblocks and FXHash. So we created a work called Human Unreadable, which had the body at the center and used performance at the center of the work. And what we have here is the human body hiding in plain sight on chain. So it's there, but it's hard to see at a first glance.
So through a process that began with a movement library of movements I created, a library, then those movements become put into unique sequences. So every time someone mints something, it doesn't just create an image, but it actually creates a movement sequence. So it's a little bit similar to Merce Cunningham chance dance, but instead of using dice, we're using a generative algorithm. And then that all becomes very obfuscated, the body is hidden, and then we return to the body in the end.
And the artwork is experienced not just on the platform of Art Blocks. So this was released on Art Blocks earlier this year in May. And so, for instance, when someone would buy a generative artwork, normally you go on Art Blocks and you buy the work, you reveal it, it's generated right in front of you. Neither the artist nor the collector know what is going to be created. And in that moment, the program that the artist created generates an output. Now, usually at that point, the artwork is over and the output exists, and that's the end of the story. But here, with Human Unreadable, we have the artwork revealed in 3 acts, which is the slow recovery of the human. So at first, the human is fully obfuscated, and like Anya said, at the end becomes fully visible. So we have the reveal on Art Blocks, and then we move through these 2 phases, which we'll describe now. So here is a screenshot of the interface on Art Blocks, and there's 400 artworks in this collection. So we created a program that is uploaded on chain, and then when that program is run, it's only allowed to run 400 times and creates 400 artworks from that program and is never allowed to generate another artwork ever again from that code base. But in this moment, you don't really see a human. You see shapes and you see different compositional elements, but you don't see the human yet. And what I mean by that is the choreography. Anya created a choreographic data set where we, through motion capture, captured her body movements in a movement library, and that data was used to generate all the visuals that we see on screen. But we don't see any dance in this image.
Then the second act, where the human becomes slightly more visible, is when the collector is able to then reveal the choreography that created their underlying artwork in the form of a movement score. And then these 2 tokens is the second token that then kind of gives the collector a bit of a hint of like what movements created this image. And then these are forever married on chain. They can't be separated. So they follow each other, whichever wallet this is in, the movement score also follows.
So there's 400 pieces that were minted on Art Blocks, and then there's 400 scores. Each score is a unique choreographic sequence underlying each unique output. So in this, the human is a bit more visible, but it's still just stick figures. So in Act 3, what we are going to do, Act 2 releases in November, and Act 3 will be announced later this year. But we're going to take the first 100 sequences of this collection, and we're going to perform them live in an institution. And for us, this is very important because someone could rock up to an institution, and maybe they go to this museum all of the time, and maybe they don't really like NFTs and blockchain and digital arts because it's too cold or always on screens. But then they're seeing a performance in front of them, no screens to be found, but they're watching generative art in the flesh, right? So digital art doesn't need to be obviously digital.
So in that final performance, the human is visible. And so we're kind of bringing blockchain art into the body and the body into blockchain art. And this was something we kind of realized because art forms like installation and performance and choreography have traditionally not been able to be transacted or purchased or collected or sold on the market. So the fact that we, with the tools that we created through this artwork, now have a way of making a choreographic sequence represented by motion data and a unique sequence of movements on chain as something that's collectible, choreography becomes an art object. So we are publishing a white paper on our process, and we're hoping it's just the very beginning of people being able to collect choreography and own choreography.
Oh, this is just a note on consent, because there's a lot of on-chain info that's not consensual.
It's not consensual, like expensive images of naked women. I'm like, she definitely doesn't know her image is being sold, so that's a problem. So we wanted to put consensual on-chain art nipple in the work.
But it's just interesting because these pieces tend to be valued higher by collectors, all the ones with nipples in it, so that was surprising. Anyway,
the market speaks.
This artwork was 9 months in the making, and so every image that you see was generated solely by code. There's no photography in it. It's not a rasterized image. It's made only with code. So every element you see, the glass elements, the silhouettes of Anya, all created by math. And to do this, we worked with over 20 dancers and engineers for 9 months, and we're still working on it now. Obviously, there's the multiple phases, and as I said earlier, there was a rigorous process where Anya developed a movement library in 5 different countries, working with dancers all over the world before we even, captured the motion data that was then finally pruned. For 5 months, we built all these tools that we realized we needed and didn't exist, and then we are going to make available in the white paper and open source them. And so here we have an exhibition on view currently at Heck Museum in Basel, Switzerland. And what we wanted to talk about was not necessarily an emphasis on this project, but the idea of how generative art, especially an artwork that is, on art blocks where people just say, okay, this is art on a screen, right? How could you possibly get it out of the screen? Well, here is a fully on-chain artwork expressed through physical means, primarily physical means, exploring the mechanisms of the algorithms. So we had the algorithm, all of the unique sequences that are stored on chain, and a card deck of choreography where people could physically decode the choreography through physical means. Doing this, people were able to immediately understand how the choreographic algorithm was working. They were able to see and visualize that all the code that they saw on the wall, and then they looked at the avatar moving and dancing, which they were able and invited to imitate and move their bodies themselves, were able to see and create a physical understanding of what digital art can be and what art that uses blockchain as a medium or a distribution system can look like. So here is just one example. And this was our attempt to show this artwork with only prints and physical means and show the process. We had a dancer also performing the movements, so you really saw the code come out of the screen. Okay. One note on this. Yeah.
You.
Tag them it? Okay. Features and traits, the one thing I just want to say here is that if you know about generative arts, you would know that the generative artworks are valued based on their features and their traits, and they're usually like luxurious beards or what color hair you have. And we thought it would be really interesting to make vulnerability a feature because we found that in tech, vulnerabilities are problems that need to be fixed. But we think this is actually something that should have value behind it, should be attributed with value. And so we actually made it a feature, and the algorithm, we didn't game the algorithm, but it ended up being rare. Vulnerability is rare, at least in human unreadable. There's only 13 pieces out of 400.
So by making vulnerability a trait and then then vulnerability becoming a rare trait, vulnerable sequences became valuable. So conceptually, we're increasing the value of vulnerability in generative art, which we felt it was lacking. So that's a win for us and for vulnerability.
Yeah. So to close our thoughts and our conversation today, we would like to think about the future of art that uses advanced technology in conjunction with the means of experiential and immersive arts, how we bring digital art out of the screen, and also how we use experiential art and immersive art to teach about tech literacy, right? And the technologies we inhabit. And immersion gets a very bad rap because it comes with all those screenshots of the Google searches that we looked at earlier. But really, immersion is to fully envelop in something, to be fully immersed. There's this thing that people say, pics or it didn't happen, but we feel it's actually pics so it didn't happen, right? Because you weren't present in that moment. Imagine a sexual fantasy. Maybe not right now, but
This is our way of saying that people always equate immersion with scale and immersion with size, but there's plenty of things that are very immersive that are actually quite small, like a book or a sexual fantasy. These are good examples. Very immersive. You're not stopping to take a picture in the middle, I hope. Immersion does not equal huge.
And we don't want our technology to be how it is in our everyday lives, right? How we use it in the world where we're being constantly nagged with notifications and taken out of the present moment. We'd rather call for not interactive art in art and technology, but dwelling art, right? Emphasizing calm technology, emphasizing technology that is there to support both the concept of the artwork, allowing us to critically reflect or get into a more healthy state, right? And go ahead.
This is an artwork that was never made because the venue shut down because of COVID, but it was an artwork that was kind of a way of reimagining how we could exist in and around and through technology, but taking a more calm technology approach where you were sitting and you were dwelling, and this is a whole situation, and the train never comes, but you're sitting at the train station. Basically teaching people how to be bored around technology was the intention of the artwork. But the idea is not everything needs to be criticizing what's happening, but immersive art and also digital art, not even only immersive art, has the power to show us how we could exist differently in, around, and through technology, which I think is also very important, to be able to imagine and feel alternatives. And so our closing points are:
digital art cannot be a de facto marketing arm of big tech. Do we all agree? Yeah, okay, good. And spectacular digital art is serving markets and companies, and critical digital art is serving the public, right? And so we feel that art is a way of survival. We agree with Yoko Ono, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.